Salutations, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Snarp Fangle podcast, episode 36. Right, David?
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, I certainly hope so as well. I am your host, Jake Metzger, along with my co-host, the daggiest fella around, ladies and gents, David Reed. David, how are you doing?
You know, I should have done my research, but I don't know what that means, so I'm...
Let me Control-Shift-T and see what it means in the tab
I don't know if I
closed.
should be offended or not.
It means, has two means. He means when you hear someone say he's such a dag, it means a quirky or funny person. And then the other is sheep farmers.
Oh.
So there you go. So you're a sheep farmer, David.
Oh, that has some connotations.
It could be a shepherd, you know.
I do. That's true. That's true with the music.
But you know what? I'll let it pass this time.
All right.
I'll let it pass
and
this time.
And that other voice you hear is, is our guest this week, who's someone who is quite the hard case while watching movies, especially the ones we're talking about today. Ladies and gents, Angela Metzger. Angela, how you doing?
I am doing pretty good, gentlemen. It's nice to be here again. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Oh, man, we're going to have fun today. And for ladies and gents, for all comments, concerns, thoughts, and debates on who's a better director's wife, Fran Walsh or Marcia Lucas, please direct them to snarpfanglepod@gmail.com. All right. So, you two, I'm very excited to talk about what we have to talk about today because it's going to be a good one.
It is.
So, welcome back to our two-film series, ladies and gents, where we take two films and they match a theme. And we pair them together, and sometimes they're well-known, most of the time they're not. And so we took two films, and we're like, it's Halloween time. We need two spooky films to analyze. So we had a couple ideas we're throwing around, and some really good ones, and some really interesting ones. And so we were going to do, like, The Conjuring, which we'll probably save for later in another
We're going to do
films.
Ghosts. That was
we're
going
to do, like, Ghosts, yeah. But this theme is spooky films. We decided to change it upon discovering a film called Dead Alive, directed by the wonderful Peter Jackson back in '92. So we had that, and they're like, well, what else is there? And then you wanted to watch, Angela, What We Do in the Shadows, because it's about time we rewatched it.
I haven't seen it in quite some time, and it's one of my favorite Taika Waititi movies.
It's so good. And that's the other film we're discussing today, is What We Do in the Shadows, ladies and gentlemen, released in 2014, directed by Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement, also written by the two. Very small movie that was released in 2014 and is quite hysterical. It's
very small budget, too.
Very small. Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but yeah, it was quite small.
It was, and upon its release, of course, it was big in New Zealand, Kiwi state, but it was not very big in the U.S. until it came on DVD. And it got a cult following because it was actually what put Taika Waititi on the map. Because so many Americans, besides Flight of the Conchordias, they were exposed to like him as a movie director. And it's pretty much what landed him the directing role for Thor.
Which is super interesting.
It's very interesting, isn't it, that movie is the impotence that kind of made Disney hire him.
And also, like, Chris Hemsworth as an Aussie, so you got that connection too.
Yeah.
So it's just really interesting. So, but anyway, we're going to be talking about two. And let's start with What We Do in the Shadows, the classic from 2014, the cult classic from 2014. And I kind of just want to start off with giving our general thoughts. And so, and also our history with the film. So, Angela, let's start with you. What's your history with What We Do in the Shadows? And what are your thoughts of it?
I was up late grading when I was teaching at Idaho State University one night, and I just had, like, I don't know, a channel on, and I was like, well, what is this? What really caught my eye about the title is it had a question mark in it. And you don't see that a lot. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to record this and watch it later. So I'm grading student papers, and all of a sudden I start watching it, and it's filmed in a mockumentary style where supposedly this camera crew is following around this group of vampires that all lives in the same flat, and they are roommates together. And it's Taika Waititi being himself and Jermaine Clemente, and I forget what the other actor who plays Deacon is. But it's basically all of these Kiwis just kind of ad-libbing their way through this movie. There are a lot of effects, but I think what caught my eye, especially the bat fight, where he turns into a bat and they fight, it's basically a bunch of roommates that after college have never grown up.
Yeah.
Even though one of them is 800 years old.
And Johnny Bra is the name
Johnny
of it.
Bra.
He plays Deacon.
Yeah, he is the young bad boy of the group, only at 200.
187 years old.
To explain the flatting situation, as they would say in Kiwi slang, there's Peter, who's like 3,000 years old. He's like a Nosferatu vampire that never says anything, but nods a lot. And then Taika Waititi is like a dandy from the 1800s who is like passive aggressively trying to get people to clean the flat. And as one of the vampires says, why do you want to clean the flat? You're just going to bring people back to kill them. And he goes, well, we can do our dishes at least. And like he goes down to Peter and he's like, Peter, I noticed there's a lot of stuff down here. I wonder if I just got you a broom. If that would help
Yeah,
you.
I can bring a broom down to help you,
I can bring a broom down here. And Peter's like, and he's like, okay, all right, fine. And it's just basically, so there's that. There's Jermaine Clemente who plays, what is it? Vlad Vladistok, the poker instead of the impaler. So it's a play on Dracula.
Yeah.
And he's like, and I was turned when I was 16. And of course, he's in his 40s.
No, that's
or 50s.
Deacon. I think.
No,
says
no,
that.
that's Vladistok.
Oh, that's.
I was turned at 16, and you're always sexy when you're a vampire. But of course, I think he was 500, 600 years old. So things were a little different back then. And
yeah, he's like, it was been as a 16-year-old, and I still look 16.
I still look 16.
It's not at all.
It's just funny. And then there's Deacon, the youngest member of the group that was turned during the Frankenstein,
era,
Gothic era, and he was selling his wares in
1820s
Germany.
or something.
And then he has a very long diatribe later about like if you were a Nazi after World War II, and if you were a vampire and a Nazi, don't be anywhere. And so it's very dry. It's not the kind of sense of humor that everybody partakes of. But I found it absolutely hilarious. And just taking away some things from it that I find. It was right after the Twilight era. So to see someone poke fun of vampires in a clever way was really entertaining.
Wasn't Breaking Dawn, was that the part 2 that released? Was that 2012? Wow, so this is like, and then Hunger Games
and then
started
you had
that
True
year.
Blood end at the same time.
Oh, that's
and
right.
You had
True
people
Blood.
getting into I think it was Hunger Games and
Hunger
a bunch
Games
of the
came
other young
out,
adult movies like Maze Runner and stuff.
Yeah, 2014 was Maze Runner.
2013 was a great year for
Yeah, 2013 and 14, yeah.
Yeah, and then this came out like a couple years later. So to see somebody kind of who is outside
taking that,
of that.
and it's at the very end of all that like vampire craze from the like mid 2000s to then.
But the best part is they are the worst vampires
They are the worst
ever.
vampires.
They're the worst. And I think what's so great about that is that's kind of one thing I noticed about a lot of vampire stories, whether you're looking at Anne Rice or you're looking at, Kathleen Harris, who did True Blood. I mean, all these stories have the thing that you've been alive all this time. You've been given this great gift and you've never grown up.
That's true.
You're
That's a
still
good point.
immature as you were when you were turned. And I think some stories, kind of like Anne Rice's Vampire Lestat, the whole arc of his, 12 or 10 books that she writes about him, is he has to grow up and be a leader by the end of that. And I find this interesting because none of them really change by the end, which is kind of the point, I think. And I just think there's little things Taika Waititi does that are just stupid and funny and things you can relate to. I think the thing that really sticks with me most is they're having this flat meeting in the beginning, like talking to the roommates, telling them they need to do dishes. And there's like blood all over the dishes. And he goes, why would I do the dishes? You bring someone here, you kill them. And he goes, you do the dishes. No, you. And then they like start hissing at each other. And then they just come down and
like
they walk
puff their
away.
chests up and fly into the air at each other. Like,
Yeah.
And then they're like, and they sit down, like, and it's like, and Taika Waititi's on a wire, and he's like really hard to like sit down. He's like, and he finally sits. So finally,
Yeah, it's just the way they play them is like you're supposed to have all this power, and they can't even get along, let alone clean up after themselves. I think what the one Vladistov is like, well, I dragged a body down the hall the other week, and you noticed there was no dust there because I brought it with the body, and it's just, I don't know. There's just something very humorous about it. It's very dry. It's very funny. And Taika Waititi is not good at killing people, at least drinking their blood. He's like, next time you'll do it, just put some paper down so if the blood gets everywhere, you have stuff. And he goes, what does it matter? You're going to kill him. You mean your red couch? Well, it's red now, But it's just a very dry sense of humor. And I found it refreshing that it's done in a mockumentary style like The Office or Modern Family. where you're just kind of like, or Spinal Tap, this is Spinal Tap, where it's just kind of like you are poking fun at something and the satire is very obvious. And that's what's so great because it's so dry. So
Yeah,
that's my take on it.
yeah, it's very, very it's so dry, and you can see Taiko's humor carry from there all the way. I haven't seen Flight of the Conchords, but I've seen him from here on. Like you go from this, you go Hunt for the Wilder People as well.
Oh yeah,
Very dry humor, but also like I've heard
Jojo Rabbit.
Jojo Rabbit too, and I've heard only good things about Hunter of the Wilder People. I haven't seen it with Sam Neill and that
It's
one
very
kid,
funny.
but I hear only good things about it, and yeah, it's really cool. And then right now he's not in the most positive light right now because of Thor: Love and Thunder. It kind of seems like I don't know.
Which I still found
I enjoy a
entertaining.
lot. I love that. I don't love it, but I enjoyed it more. I enjoyed it very much, but not as much as Ragnarok. And actually,
Yeah,
David,
Ragnarok
we were
was
talking about this the other day and how we kind of wanted to watch Ragnarok at one point for this series, and we have no idea where it'll fit. But it's funny you bring that up because then it led to this.
Yeah.
As we end up watching. But what are your thoughts, David, of what we do in the shadows and your history with
So my history with this film is absolutely nothing. This is the first time.
He
this
went
is
in blind.
Yeah, this is the first time I'd ever seen the movie. I'd heard of the movie, but I'd never seen it before. And yeah, no, I loved it. It was great. I think just I think what really got me is the juxtaposition of all the various disparate elements that don't really work well together, and the characters just kind of like act like it's normal. Like you have Taika Waititi's character being this like really passive aggressive sort of anal retentive type, almost prissy character
Compared to the other roommates, yeah.
and yet he's supposed to be, this dark evil vampire who stalks people in the shadows and kills them.
See me.
And he's just kind of like, oh, maybe if you could just, do the dishes once in a while.
Very passive aggressively too. Like I'm just gonna mention that I'll bring you a broom, Peter.
He puts down newspaper in front of his victim because he doesn't want to get blood all over the carpet or the
couch or
the
whatnot.
sofa. And invariably, he ends up hitting the main artery, and blood sprays everywhere. And he goes into a panic trying to like drink it straight from the stream as it's shooting out.
Like a fire hose.
But it's not helping at all. He's just making himself look like a fool.
Oh man, yeah.
Well, and it's great too that before he takes this lady's life, he's like, I try to make their last night fun. I give them some conversation. He's asking her, so what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to go to university, and I'm going to go travel the world and do all this stuff. And he's like, oh,
And he looks so horrified.
Yeah. He's like, well, all right, let's just bend your neck back. Like,
Yeah, she's like, oh, he's going to, oh God. And then he
you're
just,
not really expecting that to happen. Let's put it that way.
I love how like right after the flat meeting and all that, they decided we were going to go out to the clubs, yes, and
Vampire style.
vampire style.
This is
And
my
they-
look, dead but
and the-
delicious.
The most hilarious aspect of all of this is that they can't look in the mirror of how they look.
See the reflection.
So they have to draw, and they're terrible drawers and painters, what they look like and base them
in the
their
clothes.
looks off
in
of
the
that.
clothes.
And they can't just say each other, oh, that looks good or that looks bad. After a couple hundred years, you'd figure they have some kind of fashion sense.
But they don't.
But they don't. No.
They absolutely do
And
not.
it's like he's like showing Vladimir like what he looks like, and it's like a bunch of markings on his face, and he's like, oh no, it's not too much for me, and he changes, and then they reuse clothes from their victims, and so all they have to wear is those clothes.
Yeah, the best part is like sometimes you're gonna eat someone and you're like, wow, that is a really nice pair of pants. I would like to fit in those pants. And so it's like they've got like Viking clothes with like really like I don't know, skinny jeans from
and
a
a
rock
Levi
star.
jacket from one of the chicks that came over. It's like, oh my god.
And you're just like, who thought of this? But I don't know. I find it very interesting because they think they look good. And I think another thing it's being a satire on which is there were several documentaries in the 2000s about like movie stars and behind the lights and what things look like. And so that's why it's what we do in the shadows. You're behind the camera with these people looking at their real life thing, but they're terrible at what they do, even killing people. Like they kill people. Like it's
and like before you even start the movie, it says this. What was it say? It says like this film crew was granted full access. To the home of these vampires, and every crew member wore a crucifix.
Yes, for
so
protection.
they was for protection. And it's just like what? And then there's so many parts in this where they're just ad-libbing.
Yes.
There's a moment where Vladimir and Deacon, I think, are talking on a couch or something, and it's just like. Oh, no. It's when Deacon is with Nick and he's apologizing because Stu died and he's like trying to, have this heart to heart and he can't do it. But he's like trying to do
really
it.
Bad metaphors.
And it's like, it's totally ad-libbed. Like it's 100%. They're like, all right, we'll do it a couple times and we'll see what works. And they just like, and they just have a really funny sense of humor. And a lot of the dry humor works for me a lot. And I don't know about you guys, but it worked for me a lot. And Justica's like, sense of humor and Jermaine Clements as well. But I don't know. I haven't met anybody that doesn't connect with that humor.
Yeah.
But it's really funny because I do hear that there are people that say, oh, I just can't can't take it.
There was a friend that I had and her husband at ISU absolutely thought it was hilarious. She's like, this is stupid. They're making fun of Twilight. I won't watch this.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, or those are your reasons. You're missing out on comic genius.
Yeah.
But what's very funny is they ended up doing a TV series.
Yes.
About 3 or 4 years after this came out.
Yeah.
And they actually came back for the season finale.
Oh, that's cool.
All the original actors. And they are the Vampire Council, but in America. And you're looking at these vampires that live in Manhattan or they're like in Brooklyn. They're somewhere in New York. And they're
Staten
being
Island.
put on trial. And they have all these famous people that have played. Wesley Snipes shows up.
Really?
Danny Trejo shows up. Rachel, I forget what her name is. She was on True Blood. She shows up. Tilda Swinton, who was in The
Tilda
Last
Swinton's in
Lovers,
it?
Left Alive with Tom Hiddleston, shows up. And then they start playing. They like start breaking the fourth wall. And they're like, is Brad coming? What about Tom Cruise? Because they did Interview with a Vampire. And they're like, no, Brad and Tom said they're not coming. And they're like, well, what about, what's the guy who played Edward, Batman?
Oh, Pattinson.
Is Rob coming? No, Rob said this part of his life is done. He's not coming. And it's really hilarious. Even Mark Hamill makes a cameo.
I saw that's
in
what I
the
saw.
second season, and they play with him being a vampire. And he wants one of the guys to pay him $50. And the guy's like, I have never paid any debt in my life. I'm going on the lam with an assumed name. And it's just like the same sense of humor. And Taika Waititi and Jermaine Clement produced it.
It's really funny you bring up. I knew we were going to talk about the show, but I was just checking online here. Holy crap. We're recording this on October 21st.
Okay.
A couple weeks before Halloween, right?
Yes.
Guess when season 6 premieres?
Oh, I thought 5 was the last one.
So they're doing a season 6.
Oh,
Guess
wow.
what the premiere date is?
I don't know.
Tonight.
Oh my God.
So yeah, I started
Taika Waititi
2019 to 2024, and they're still going. So and Matt Berry is awesome. I love Matt Berry.
I have to
what's
say,
the meme where it's like him in that show and he's like Yoda, like he said,
because he used to be a musician in the Victorian.
Yeah, he's
age.
like, what are you doing here?
Yeah,
it's like I don't know the
I have to say it's some of
Matt
the
Berry's
best
great.
written television that's also done in a mockumentary style. But one of the wonderful things that they did is they threw an American vampire who's an energy vampire, and he doesn't suck blood.
Vampire.
He just will talk to you about the condition of ink cartridges.
Is he the like
And
the nerdy
and then
fella?
all of a sudden people like start falling asleep, and he goes, the trick is you can't let him talk. You got to keep mumbling about nothing. It's like one of those people in the office when they leave you, you're like, why am I so tired? He's an energy vampire. and I have to say, like, that is worth watching the TV series. And they did some really fun stuff in the 4th and the 5th season. Patton Oswalt actually came because they said it was going to be their last season. They end up killing him, and it's great. But I'm glad they're bringing it back for a 5th season, a 6th season. It definitely deserves.
Yeah, this is October 21st on Hulu.
Oh my gosh, that's
crazy. That's really funny. Let's talk about Nick and Stu. So,
Okay.
the scene. So we were shown in the film that the vampires. This is how they get their people. And Deacon has is a familiar or
Deacon has a familiar,
Yeah,
the woman,
and
but I
the
forget
woman-
what her name was.
Yeah, Jackie.
Jackie.
Jackie is familiar, who he says to go get people to bring back to the house so they can eat. And he promises her as his familiar that she will become a vampire one day. And he just totally straight up just gaslights her, takes advantage of her.
The entire movie.
And she has a family and a husband,
A husband
and
and
kids.
2 children,
And she still wants to be a vampire?
and he comes to the door. He's like, "Invite me," and she goes, "No, kids,
No,
don't
kids,
let that
go.
man in.
Don't look at him. Don't
Yeah.
look at him. And Deacon like makes her do this. So she brings a couple people there. One is a girl, one's a guy. The girl gets killed, and then Nick, the camera's following him around the entire house. And Nick is just running for his life. He's so scared. He's like, "This is the best up place. I gotta get out of here." And he runs around, and it's just in comedy ensues. And
It's absolute chaos.
it's chaos. And
And
like they're
gags.
flying around. And there's a bit where Vlad Smear can transform into animals, but he doesn't get the face right.
He has never since his relationship with the
Oh
beast.
yeah.
He could never get the face
Never get
quite
the
right.
face quite
So
right.
he transforms into a cat with his own face on it.
He's like, "Bleh."
Oh my goodness.
And Nick's like, "Oh my god!" And he's running around, and they're like, "Wee!" And they're like chasing him
They're
out
giggling,
the door.
they're
Giggling, laughing. And then he finally bursts out of the house. He runs away, and they're like, "Yes!" And they're gonna start chasing him. And Jackie, of course, left after all. She's like, "Sorry, Nick." She's outside driving away. And he runs out, and he's like, "Oh god, I'm safe." And the cameras follow him for the longest time. And then finally, out of nowhere, Peter comes out of nowhere and grabs
the
him
3,000-year-old
The three-
vampire
yeah.
or 8,000-year-old vampire tackles him.
and bites him.
And they're like, "Oh, Peter
Aw,
got
Peter
him.
got him.
Oh, no."
Oh no! They were all
And
like,
then
"Oh."
it cuts to several months later, and Deacon is doing this bizarre dance.
Oh my
the
god!
rest.
Why? He's doing
And all of a
this.
sudden, you hear a tapping on the window, and the camera turns around, and there's Nick floating outside the window in the dark. And he's like, "I am trying to put on an erotic striptease for my friends, and you just ruined it." And he goes, "Why are you going through window? Go down to door. The neighbors are gonna see you." Just like, what?
And it's like they haven't had a new vampire friend
Yeah,
in like 100 years or something.
yeah,
I
because
don't know.
Deacon's the young one at 200 and some years old. He's the young bad boy, and Nick has now usurped his place.
has now been a couple months old as a vampire.
However, with Nick comes Stu.
And who is Stu, Angela?
Stu is his software analyst best friend. And
He works in databases.
He works in database, and he just kind of is, I guess his sister used to date Stu, but when they broke up, Stu and him stayed friends. And he hasn't told Stu that he's a vampire yet.
Oh,
And so they have to go through that painful conversation. And he tells Peter in the basement, he doesn't say anything. He's just this Nosferatu looking vampire. And he goes, "He's vegetarian. So I think if you turned him, that would really make him uncomfortable. He doesn't like meat, let alone eating people. So maybe don't bite him." And Peter's just like
standing there,
nodding
there,
his
like,
head.
mhm.
And the problem is, as with most groups and friends, the Deacon does not like Nick.
No.
But when sometimes the person that no one likes brings in a friend, everybody likes that friend.
Yep.
That dynamic changes. He shows them how to take selfies. He shows them.
Those how to use the internet.
Yeah, I know. And so it's just it's a hilarious like fish out of water kind of like these people have to take public transportation to the clubs to kill people. They're on the bus with like the handicap
And
accessible
they have wolf
stuff.
fur on and
Yeah, and they're like,
coats.
"We are going to go on the town, vampire style." And it's just like, you are the worst vampires ever.
Oh man, David, what do you think of Stu and Nick and that whole dynamic?
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I like that just for like no reason, it seems like they're just like everyone just like takes an immediate liking to
To
Stu.
Yeah, it's like
It's just like, yes.
Nick,
Yeah,
Nick has his
Stu's-
issues, but Stu's great. Oh, I love
Stu's
Stu.
cool. Yeah, we love Stu.
We love Stu. He's so cool.
And they're just like, it's like, what? Like,
Why?
at any other point, they would be livid that Nick brought in a human friend to meet them all and told them that they're all vampires, but they just take a liking to Stu for some inexplicable reason. So now he's part of their group.
Yeah, and it's not all negative aspects with Nick. Nick lets them into new clubs that he knows.
Yes.
He's like, "Oh, my friend's a bouncer. Let's go down here."
Yeah.
And he goes down. They go down. They get into a new club. Stu's just there, and he's like, and eventually Nick goes to Stu, and he finally tells him, "I'm a vampire," and it's like this supposed to be this built up. It's this really
Like
serious
I'm coming
talk.
out moment.
Yeah, I'm coming out moment as a
yeah.
vampire. And he tells Nick, and Nick's like, "Oh, okay, well that makes sense." And then
why
that's
you don't
it.
play- that's why we don't play tennis in the
That's
daytime.
why we don't play tennis in the daytime
No, you
anymore.
don't.
It's at night. And so,
Yeah.
and so we then encounter the werewolves at some point after this.
I forget what his name is. but
And,
the
and
guy
I
who's
don't remember the
leader.
guy who plays him, but he plays in
He's
what's
Our
the-
Flag is Death.
Our Flag
that
is
Taika
Death.
Waititi does.
Yeah,
And he was also in Jumanji as the one
Jumanji.
explaining, here's how you do this. You
He's
know,
like the
he's,
game
he's a
master,
famous
yeah.
Kiwi actor,
yeah.
but he's
famous
always
fella.
done bit parts.
Let me look his name
And
up.
he is fantastic. And so one night when they're leading the club, they're like, oh no, werewolves.
Oh, Deacon's like,
Some
I
stuff.
smell that.
Some stuff's gonna go down. You better be careful. And then like they go and they insult these guys and they start cussing. And the guy's like, no. What are you cussing for? The leader of the pack. Werewolves, not swearwolves. we don't do that. We don't cuss. And then one of the guys gets upset because he pretends to throw a stick and he goes, there's no stick. Don't chase it. And then all of a sudden they're like, the guy starts going, rum, rum, and he goes, no, breathe to 10. Be human again. Breathe to 10. Be human again. And it just kind of shows that there are these other creatures in this world that's supposed to be so scary, and it's not. It's the most boring, mundane existence of taking public transportation to go find victims in clubs. And we do have a bit of a confrontation between Nick and Deacon. They get in a fight and they turn to bats.
They turn to bat. They're like, oh, bat fight!
Yeah, bat fight! And then the one guy transforms back into a human and throws Nick against a steel door. And they're like, well, that's not fair. And then he flies off. And Stu is just standing there as the human watching this. So they decide to go to a restaurant to get some food for Stu. And just Nick is just having a bad night because he tries to eat a French fry and ends up getting violently sick because they can't eat human food.
They can't eat human food.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh. I mean, it's just like you don't really know where it's going or how it's going to end. But everything kind of leads up to this unholy masquerade where all the demons and like the zombies and witches and stuff, they're all going to be there. And it's done in like a church basement kind of bowling alley. And they have this huge mirror, and of course vampires can't see their reflection. So there's this one point where everybody's dancing and the camera pans over the mirror and the only people you see is Stu dancing by himself and a zombie clapping. Like that's pretty much it because nobody else can see the reflection. And of course Vladislav, the one vampire, doesn't want to go. And the reason he doesn't want to go is the beast is supposed to be there. And they keep saying the beast. And every time they turn to him, you hear this bell ding. And he goes, I hope you never see the beast. The beast is the worst creature on the planet. And he just goes into this whole thing. And then they're at the Unholy Masquerade, which is obviously a church basement that's been decorated.
It's a bowling alley.
It's a bowling alley /
something
basement.
like
And then they're raffling off a human in a cage. And if you buy 5 tickets, we're going to pull your name twice. So it's like, what are the things? Like, buy more tickets so we can have money for the next year's Unholy Masquerade. And all of a sudden, they're like, and now I'd like to introduce Claudia so-and-so. And they all start clapping. And I think it's Taika Waititi's character turns to the camera and goes, that's her, that's the beast. And it's this normal looking vampire lady. And all of a sudden you go to Vladislav and he's like, the beast is the name that I gave my ex-girlfriend Pauline because she impaled me on a lamppost and then said some very hurtful things. And it's just, he's never gotten over this thing with their on again, off again relationship.
What I love about that is, so Vladislav is, or what is his name? It's
Vladislav. Yeah.
Vladislav. Yeah, you
And
Vladislav.
the beast is Pauline.
Pauline, that was
Pauline.
Yeah, but in the beginning of the movie, you have Vladislav just like trying to like turn into animals, trying to hypnotize people, And they mentioned that he was once a master of doing that. He could hypnotize whole crowds.
Whole groups of people.
He could change into whatever form he wanted. But, you know, after his battle with the beast, his greatest rival, he just never was the same.
Never the same.
Since then. And it's like, every time it mentions that, it shows like these old woodcuts of like this, like
the most bizarre,
weird looking medieval creatures. And yeah, come to find out that the beast is just his ex-girlfriend
that he's never gotten over. Exactly, and this is the root of his trauma. And it's funny too because he confronts her and whatnot. But it's the most bizarre thing that it's just this normal looking lady that this guy has been hurt from, and every time they cut away, it's some nightmare-inducing woodcut from the Middle Ages.
Yeah, and it shows it over and over and over.
Werewolf.
It's like, oh God, this must be a really serious creep.
Yeah,
like this monster of some kind. No, it's just his ex.
And at one point, it's one of my favorite lines in the movie. They're trying to get him dressed up to go to the unholy masquerade. And he's like, no, do you want the red pants or the black pants? What do you want? And he's like, I'm not going. I won't. And he turns around and he's all white and old. And they're like, oh my God, what happened? God. And he goes, just leave me alone to do my dark bidding on the internet.
He's like, what are you bidding? What are you bidding on?
What are you bidding on? He goes, a couch.
A table.
And a table.
That would go really nicely. In the kitchen.
He's on eBay. He's on eBay bidding.
Yeah, leave me alone to do my dark bidding. And he doesn't even say on the internet. He just says, leave me alone to do my dark bidding. And you're like, ooh, dark bidding.
What is he up to?
And he's bidding on something on eBay.
Yeah, he's on eBay. And it's just like... you know, and one of the best parts is when they get to the ball and they find out that Stu is human.
Oh, no.
And everybody's
and
like,
then they turn the camera, and the only person in the mirror is Stu and the zombie.
And the zombie guy who just kind of like clapping.
He's like,
but what's interesting is they try to tell the vampires, well, this was your fault. Actually, you said that I could bring a +1, but you didn't indicate, that it couldn't be human.
Could have been human.
And then they're like, look at him, stand up, Stu. And he goes, tell us what you are doing.
Poor Stu.
And Stu is like, well, my name is Stu. Speak louder, Stu. We can't hear you. It's just the last thing you need someone to tell you in front of a group of people that want to eat you. And he's like, my name is Stu. I'm a internet consultant for a mapping firm, and I do like data entry. He is a virgin. He's
totally a virgin. Kill him.
It's like, no. And then all of a sudden, this figure in a mask appears. And he goes, Pauline, you have forgotten your lover. And she goes,
who are you?
Georgie? Is that who it is? And he goes, no. And he's like, can't get the mask off. And it's Vladislav. And she goes, oh, hello, blankety blank. And he's like, don't call me that. Well, don't call me Beast. And she's there with a date. And the date's like, well, why'd you bring this human here? You got a whole camera crew of humans.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
And they just noticed.
And then he goes, you cannot eat camera crew. Well, maybe one camera guy.
Yeah, maybe Dave.
But that's it,
But that's
you know.
it.
And then the next thing you know, they said, like, this guy could be a vampire killer. And then the next thing you know, Vladislav and her boyfriend start fighting, and the music ramps up, and everybody's watching. And then someone stabs Pauline's boyfriend.
Oh, no.
With a spear right through his chest in the heart. And it's Stu. And the best line is they're like, get out of the unholy masquerade right now. And so they get out there, and the best line is Vladislav turning to Stu. They're like, oh my God, Stu, that was amazing. And Vladislav saying, wasn't it awesome how we both equally defeated him together, Stu?
Yeah.
It's very dry.
Vladislav is like getting his butt kicked. And it's like, it looks like he's like gonna get like his essence sucked out of him by the other guy or something, and then right at the last minute, Stu intervenes with the spear and impales the guy. And then while they're walking home, Vladislav's like, "Yes, we were both equally effective."
Yeah, we both equally defeated him together. And then, of course, we have the Act 3 twist.
Yes,
which is they run into the vampires while they're walking. No,
the werewolves.
The werewolves while they're walking.
And one thing more. I love the thing about the werewolves is that it's supposed to be like a very like noble like fraternity where there's like the leader
And they're very conscious
and they're very
of other
conscious
people
and
and
like,
stuff.
and they're werewolves and they're like no we got to do it this way and we got to get all of our stuff done
And what we're gonna
and
do
we
is we're
don't
gonna
werewolves are not swearwolves, you know, like they're
and
trying
we're
to
gonna
better
tie
themselves
ourselves to trees.
because there's definitely I've met people who are from those kind of fraternities. It's just like
It's
that.
a pack mindset.
It's a pack.
It's a pack.
Yep.
I taught
Like
at
I got
Chico
all my
State for 2
I got
years.
all my chores done. I'm making dinner Friday night, and then we're gonna go out and party.
Yes, but we have to get this stuff done
But
first.
we have to get this done.
And the
first.
best part is when you come upon the werewolves, the leader is the only one wearing a track pants that are really stretchy. He goes, "Well, you guys all doing that? Well, my other one had blood on it. My missus couldn't get
My
to it
missus
before the
can't
full
get to it in
for the
time.
moon." He goes, "Listen,
You're in
you know how
skinny
big you get?
jeans.
You got to have the other. You rip right through the jeans.
Your thighs are going to
And he
expand.
goes, "Don't tell yourself that tree's like a twig. You got to snap that in half." And then the one guy comes to him with a log, and he goes, "Oh no. Did you forget the combination?" And he goes, "I did. I forgot the combination because I was turning last month." And he goes, "Well, just put it to 000. That's the factory reset." And then the leader starts cussing. They're like, "Werewolves, not swearwolves."
And then
You
the
know?
vampires show up, and he's like, "Oh, what are you doing here?" And then the full moon finally.
They start turning, and they're like, "Get out of here!" And like they're trying to warn people, like, "Get away!
Yeah.
We don't want to kill people."
Yeah, they're like telling people what's gonna happen. They're like, yeah, that human guy, you guys got to run. That human guy, he's probably gonna
He's
die
gonna be the
first.
first to go. Yeah.
And then they transform, and you don't see them right away, but the glimpses you do, it's just like
Massive.
them in these like these
Yeah, they're
wolf
obvious.
suits.
Yeah, they're obviously in these cheap, terrible looking werewolf suits.
And they do chase down one of the camera guys
Yep, and
and
they
eat
kill
him.
him. They kill
And
him.
then unfortunately, the big turn in the movie
Oh.
that made me sad the first time I watched it
Mm.
was they get Stu.
No.
And they're like, "Stu, leave him alone." And then Stu gets taken.
Mm.
And his body is a bloody mass on the ground. And they're
He's
just
thrown
like,
back and
and
forth.
the vampires and the werewolves
And the
are just
vampires
throwing him
are like the vampires in the air, like, "No, Stu, don't hurt
grab
him.
my hand, Stu.
He's okay."
And like one of the vampires was knitting a scarf for Stu. I mean, it was just like they loved Stu. And it's funny as you watch more of the movie, if you watch it a second time, like the vampire that's knitting, the young bad boy, he's got like a full shirt done. And he's knitting like a matching hat for it in the very final scene. He's got like the one with the moon on it. And so this is the scene Jake was talking about where Nick and Deacon try and talk about. He's trying to comfort him. And they end up throwing the scarf that was partially done in the stream. And they're like, "Goodbye. Goodbye, Stu."
You were a good friend.
And then it says like a couple months later, and there is a subplot where Taika Waititi's character, is it, what's his name?
Let's see. I have it right here.
Someone, Vladislav is the one.
Viego.
Okay. So Viego, who's like the 18th century dandy, came to New Zealand from Germany because he was in love with this woman after World War II.
Mm.
The only problem is his familiar put the wrong postage on his coffin. So he didn't arrive at New Zealand until 8 months after
18 months later.
18 months later, and she had already remarried. And he talks about this off and on. And like here she's 96 years old. And he goes and stands outside the retirement house window every
He just
night,
stares
just
up
looking
at
at her.
Like-
And it's really funny because he said, "Well, I could have killed that guy, but she was happy.
Yeah, she was happy.
And I wanted her to have a good life."
And then the one souvenir she gives him is a necklace with a locket in there of a picture. And he found a picture and put it in there of her, but it's a silver locket, a silver necklace, which is poisonous to vampires.
Yeah, and he like puts it on. He's like, and it's burning.
It's like
his
smoke
skin.
coming out of
There's
him.
smoke.
Like,
Well, and part of the lore, and a lot of people have wondered, why can't vampires go for water, have silver? And one of the theories in a lot of like vampire lore, and people haven't really explored this, I think it'd be an interesting thing, is that the first Dracula was actually Judas. And it's one of the reasons he can't stay in the sun because he killed himself at sunset. He took 30 pieces of silver to portray Jesus. And so, like the vampire curse, supposedly, there's a movie they did years ago with Johnny Lee Miller called I think it was Dracula 2000. It's a very young Gerard Butler.
yeah.
And that's basically the premise, is that he was Judas and he was cursed not to die. And I always thought that was very interesting.
Weird.
I've never heard that
never
before.
heard
I had read it in some series, and I was like, oh, that's kind of weird.
That is strange.
And I'm not an aficionado or anything.
I was under the impression that the original, I mean, vampire folklore has existed for
in every
for
culture
a long, long time.
Yes.
But as far as codifying vampire stories in the modern era, my understanding was that began with the novel Dracula, who was based
1899 by Bram Stoker.
Yeah, who the character in that novel, if I understand correctly, was based on Vlad the Impaler.
Yeah, and it was kind of, and also it like takes place in Eastern Europe, and it's right. There was a lot of panic at the turn of the 1900s because it was written in 1899. And people were like, the advance of technology and factories and everything, what's going to happen? But it is also an explanation of why you can't look at crucifixes, because he betrayed Jesus. So a lot of people, I think it's a combination of myths that have developed over years. What I love about this movie is they make fun of all of that. And they do it in the best way. And you want to explain our twist at the end, gentlemen? Two twists.
Well, the first one, if I remember correctly,
They get a call.
They get a call from Nick, who's been like excommunicated, and he was been shamed out of the house.
Shame. And this was like a year before Game of Thrones did it, I think.
Yeah,
and they're like,
because
they'll
they
take
do
the
that.
walk of shame, and they just walk around and going shame. And then and then they're like, now you are banished from our flat. And as he walks away, Stu's walking after him. This is the middle of the movie. And Viago's like, bye, Stu. Come see us anytime you want. And it just, they love Stu. They just don't like Nick.
Yeah.
And Nick calls them out of nowhere. Like, guys, I got a great surprise. Meet me before the sun comes up. And you won't believe what I found. And what happens then?
Oh, with Nick and
with Nick.
Yeah, so they answer the door. They're like, who is it? And then it's Stu, and he's alive,
and he's got scars.
He's been mauled, like he's got scars on his face, and they let him in.
Seal, look at his scars.
Yeah, look at his scars. And then all of a sudden, they look behind Stu, and it's the whole werewolf group.
The pack.
The pack.
And the leader is coming into their house.
Which I think the actor's name is Rhys Darby, I think.
Oh, yeah, Rhys
Darby.
Yeah.
So that's his name. But yeah, so they explain that, oh yeah, you know what? He started shaking on the ambulance stretcher, and he was like convulsing, and then he runs off into the night.
And these two cops that you see earlier.
Yeah, the two cops, yeah.
And they actually got their own spin-off series that they wrote two seasons on BBC for them.
Oh, on BBC.
Wellington PD. And I watched it on HBO, and I laughed at every episode. There's a ton of supernatural stuff going around in this teeny capital of Wellington, because Wellington is not that big.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's very interesting. But these cops come back, and they're like, we know what did this to him, because they're looking at Stu's body. And they bring like this border collie that's the sweetest looking border collie. He's going to have to be put down.
Yeah, he's like, they like find him all mauled and like torn apart.
This border
and then like border collie,
they're
just randomly fine. And he's like, oh yeah, we're going to have to put it down, poor guy.
and then they do a flashback.
Oh, for those wondering, Wellington Paranormal, which is what they call it, I guess, in America.
Okay.
Is right now on Max if you're interested.
Yeah. So the police.
These cops are awesome. We'll talk about them in a little bit.
They come into the house, and Viago's like, you will not see anything out of the ordinary. And they're like, well, I hope not, mate.
Yeah, well, I hope not.
And he's like, there's vampires on the ceiling.
And he's like, and as they walk into the kitchen, they see Deacon and Nick almost killing each other, and Vladimir's like holding Deacon down on the floor,
and they're all levitating.
They're all levitating, and Viago's like cuts to Viago like in the interview, and he's like, I'm not always the greatest. I'm not always
controlling people's minds.
Controlling people's minds. I'm not the best hypnotist, and I tried my best.
And
they don't say anything. They're just like, oh yeah, you know. And they're like, oh, what's that up in there? And there's like,
everybody freezes.
Everybody freezes, and it's a big moment. And he's like, not a single smoke detector up there.
Really? and then like finally he was like, you know what we should do as they walk up the stairs? We should kill those cops. And then the other guy says, you know what? Maybe kill them, but I want to hear more about their safety tips for our household first.
And Vladimir's like, I want to hear more about their
safety. They're the best. Those cops are so deadpan, and they're hilarious.
And we totally forgot to mention that Peter dies.
Oh yeah. That's why Nick is
That's
vanished.
why Nick is getting like,
because Nick is like going around the town, and he's like telling everyone he's a vampire. And
you see Twilight? I'm the guy from Twilight.
he talks to this guy.
He's
He's
like,
like,
"My
I'm
name's
a
Twilight."
vampire, and that guy's like, well, I'm a vampire hunter, and he thinks he's just messing with him and goes
Yeah.
along his merry way. And then we cuts to later in the movie. We see
middle of the day.
yeah,
Middle of the day.
middle of the day. They're he's they find Peter and he's on fire because the daylight's beaming
in the
into the
basement.
room, and
The camera like looks down the hall, the staircase, and it's just Peter like, ah, and he's on fire.
and they go and investigate after
Don't
after
go
it's
in
all
there.
over.
There's sunlight down there.
One of my favorite lines is, "Turn off those cameras. Don't you know that our friend was killed in a tragic sunlight accident?"
Yeah.
Like, what?
But they go down there to investigate. They find Peter's body has been burnt to a crisp, and they find the body of this vampire hunter who got into the window that
let the
Peter
sun in.
killed and who let the sun in. And his neck's all broken, so they turn his head around to see who he is, and it's the guy who said he was the vampire hunter in the club.
And Nick's like, oh, that guy told me he's a vampire hunter.
I gave him my email. Like, what?
Oh my god! And then the cops think there's a 4th century, which there was, and then they end up in the basement. They don't see the pile of burning bones that was
Peter.
That was Peter, or the dead man. They see him as he's sleeping. He's like, oh, he's just
They're like,
just
you gotta
sleeping,
get your friend off the floor. He's gonna feel terrible
Yeah,
when
it's
he
only
wakes
12
up, mate.
It's only yeah. He's got like crucifixes and wooden stakes on him.
And then all of a sudden they go, wait, do you see that? And they shine the flashlight on Peter's like burnt corpse, and they're like, oh no. And they're like, you got a bunch of rags and paint right under your electrical outlets. That's gonna be a fire
That's a
disaster.
fire hazard.
And a fire
And they're like,
hazard.
let's kill them and eat them. And then Viago's like, no, if we do, more is gonna come. Like more cops are gonna show up. And then Vladimir's like, well, I do want to hear what they have to say about
About
safety
safety
concerns.
issues. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in the end, the werewolves show up, and the leader was like, I didn't really want to go into a den of vampires. But at the same time, they seem like pretty nice blokes. And they're all like having a beer together. Yeah. And then the other twist is Viago is standing
Yeah, you see a
there,
random lady there.
This
This
with an
old-
older lady, and she looks at like Stu's scarred face, and she goes, what happened to your face, dear? And he goes, well, I got attacked by werewolves. And she goes, oh, are you all right? He goes, yes, ma'am, I'm all right. And then the next thing you see is Viago holding her hand, and it's Catherine, the woman he's been in love with. And he said, but a lot of people will look at us and see this age gap. And because he looks like he's in his 40s, she's 96. And he goes, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that I'm 4 times older than her. That we're very happy. I bet her she's a vampire, and we're going to live together for the rest of our lives.
And that's
And
the end of the
that's
movie.
pretty much how it
That's
is.
how it ends. Oh man,
Yeah.
this movie's great. I have some trivia from IMDb that actually is kind of interesting. So Stu, whose real name is Stu, so he's
actually Stu.
Rutherford had not played a primary acting role in a movie prior to appearing in this one. He was an extra in Boy in 2010.
Wow, that was one of Taika Waititi's movies.
Yeah, and Stu was a part-time business analyst for a Wellington company, Landworks. He was hired for the film under the impression that he would be working on computers, that he would play a small part in the film.
And he's one of the most
important parts.
pivotal characters.
Yeah, and then the building used for the exterior shots of the vampire's house
Oh my God.
used to be Peter Jackson's office.
Oh my gosh, that's
awesome.
hilarious.
And then on the little of the writing side, Taika and Jermaine wrote 150 pages of script apparently, but chose not to show it to a single person involved in the film. They
Of
only
course not.
described broad strokes of what each scene was about, sometimes providing a beginning and an end point.
Oh, that's
That
great.
was to keep things spontaneous and allow the actors to be surprised and unfold before their eyes. So just some interesting
And I will say as a disclaimer, like this humor is not for everybody. The 2 movies that we watched are rated R.
They
So
are rated R,
there is
yes,
language,
yes.
there's
lots
violence,
of language, lots of
there's some
violence.
innuendo.
Yes.
But I will definitely say that even if it's not perhaps your art form.
What we do in the shadows is great.
Yeah, well, I feel
I
like
would recommend this way more than Dead
Alive.
Yeah.
But I feel like even though we took great joy in it,
Yeah.
I take great joy in it because it is a satire and a criticism
Yeah.
of certain genres.
Yeah. This ain't no Seth Rogen comedy. Or
It is
anything
not.
like
It
that.
is, but
This isn't Pineapple
it is rated R.
Express. This is
and I will
definitely
say that.
more-
So like, don't
Yeah.
watch it with your kids.
Yeah, no.
But I will say it is a hilarious, dry comedy, and every time I watch it, I notice something different.
It's hilarious.
And to me, that's kind of a marker of a good film.
Yeah, then this I think this was my second or third time watching it, and there's a few parts where I noticed Taika like breaks character,
Yeah.
and Deacon, not Deacon, but Vladimir's like, or Jermaine Clement's like, "Rrr," and he's like just scowling, but you can tell he's trying to hold laughter.
Because they worked together for so long. Yeah.
It's so funny.
Well, and they're such a good team because they did, I forget, like 3 or 4 seasons of Flight of the Concordia.
oh wow,
together-
Oh, it was a series. I thought it
It's
was
a series.
I thought it was a movie.
I believe it's a series. I haven't seen it in years.
I believe there was also a Flight of the Conchords movie,
I bet they did.
Oh, okay.
but
Yeah.
it was a TV series,
Mm.
And then they made a movie afterwards.
which is funny. I've never actually watched it, but I listened because it's about like it's about like two people who are like part of like a music group, from what I understand.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. If
Yeah.
I
So
remember
I've actually
right. It's
listened.
been 15, 16 years since I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've actually listened to the songs, like the
really?
music.
Oh.
Because they wrote their own
Yeah,
music and stuff.
because it's and I like for the longest time I thought Flight of the Conchords was just like a band. I didn't
Yeah,
know it
yeah.
was a fake band from a TV show.
Well, and I think it's because it became so popular. The theme is adulting. And I feel like that's kind of what this whole What We Do in the Shadows is it's all about adulting, and these vampires just can't adult.
They just can't. Do
And
it. Yeah.
Flight of the Concordia has similar themes. And I feel like if anybody wants to know Jermaine Clemente, you have probably heard him sing Shiny from Moana. He is the large hermit crab. And he's very, very, I forget what his name is in that, but it's just like, God, he has a good voice too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
they're both very gifted.
and Flight of the
individuals.
Conchords. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, Jermaine Clement and then Brett McKenzie are these two folk band members that are in New York looking for stardom.
Yeah.
and Reese Darby is like their friend
Oh,
or something.
he's so great. He is good in almost anything. And then finally, when he did Our Flag Is Death a couple years ago
Mm.
on HBO, which is about the real.
and he's the main character. right?
He's Steve Bonney, was a real life pirate
That's
who
awesome.
worked with Blackbeard, and he actually was a gentleman in real life. And the show kind of plays with this.
Hmm.
He was a gentleman that was really bored of having land and managing his estate. So in the middle of the night, he put his affairs in order, grabbed some of his wealth, bought a ship, and put all his books on it, and he would read to the crew. And he ended up working with Blackbeard. And in
Oh.
the series, Taika Waititi is Blackbeard, but that their relationship never happened. But it is very interesting because he was a gentleman pirate
yeah.
and everybody was after him. And he actually teamed up with Blackbeard to keep the British Navy off his back.
Hmm.
And he was famous for taking his entire library with him. So it's a fascinating story, but it's very dry too.
Yeah, it seems like everything I find it interesting like Taika Waititi, he has so many people really like to give that guy shows and green lights and a lot of different stuff. I mean, he was poised at I think 2 years ago to do a Star Wars trilogy.
Oh my gosh.
And it was rumored to be Knights of the Old Republic, and we've seen nothing.
nothing from
Just like
that
Ryan
time
Johnson,
period.
it seems like that's all canceled too. So I don't know what the future holds for him. He'll probably still do Marvel stuff, but I don't know. I feel like he's kind of hit the height of his fame right now. But I guess we'll see what happens because I think he's still a really cool creative fella. I mean, just look at
Yeah.
Jojo Rabbit. Have you seen Jojo Rabbit?
Jojo
Oh, yeah.
Rabbit.
Oh, yeah.
It's-
Such a great
it's
movie.
such a
what
great
What I
movie.
like about Taika Waititi, What We Do in the Shadows is not quite as emotional, I would say.
No.
But Taika Waititi, if you've ever seen Boy,
It's a genius comedy.
or Whale Meets Squid, that has Jermaine Clemente, and they meet this girl at a party, and they're dressed in costumes,
Oh,
and it's
huh.
can they have an adult relationship? And the problem is they're still kids, and
Oh.
they're in their 40s and their 30s, but all of his movies have a very strong
Mm.
emotional connection. Like Boy is basically about this boy trying to find his dad, and he wants to impress him with these Michael Jackson moves, and in the end, Taika Waititi dresses up like Michael Jackson
Oh, that's
and has all the Maori kids do a Thriller routine.
Hmm.
And there's a very strong
And there's a little bit of more
emotional
of that.
connection, but I
Yeah.
think you really got to see him shine in doing that for a larger audience in Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah.
And they gave him a lot of crap about
Yeah,
playing Hitler,
which
And
was so
he is
weird.
half
It's so
Polynesian,
bizarre.
Maori, and half Jewish, and they said you can't make fun of Hitler.
Hmm.
And he was like,
Which
yes.
is so funny
It's so
because
weird.
for many, many years, Jews in Hollywood
Mel Brooks!
were given
Yeah,
the
Mel
green
Brooks.
light
Yeah.
to do all the Hitler parodies they
Springtime
want.
for Hitler
Yeah.
and Germany.
Well, 2019.
Yeah, I mean, Mel Brooks was famous for doing a rap
Yes!
song as Hitler, and so they're gonna turn around and tell Taika Waititi that he can't play Hitler.
Yeah.
It was
The
just so funny
Polynesian
to
Jew,
me.
you cannot
Yeah.
play Hitler. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
But I feel like a lot of that too is a product of its time during Me Too.
Well,
and woke and
it's
canceling things.
Exactly. Like
it's
it's 2019. It was in the latter half of like
It was around
the
Christmas.
first term of Trump's presidency and all the media going crazy over that kind of stuff and more political,
People needed a channel for their
Yeah,
aggression,
political,
and it came
social
out in some
stuff
really weird
happening.
ways.
BLM, all that kind of stuff. Like it's just craziness. So I get it why people were mad at it, but I also don't understand why. Like it seemed like it was more like a farce to me.
Well, and I feel
Just to
like
cause trouble.
What's really good in Jojo Rabbit, if you haven't seen it, it's this boy who's been
So good.
indoctrinated by
He's a Nazi boy.
Nazis propaganda with the Hitler Youth.
Yeah.
And his best imaginary friend is Adolf Hitler, which Taika Waititi played. What do you go? Highlander, show me you minute. Highlander. And it's just hilarious because you have kind of these outcasts from society. Sam Rockwell. They told me I could not go back and serve with one eye. Could one with one eye do this? And he's shooting. And it's just like it's so
Sam Rockwell's
bizarre.
great in
It's
that.
hilarious. It's comic gold.
And it's got and
it hits the emotional beats hard.
Yeah.
From the dad going missing to what eventually happens to the rest of his family. And they do it in a very tasteful way. But man, does it have an emotional punch.
I mean, even
yeah, that's the thing about that movie
Yeah.
is it's incredible how much of an impact the story and the characters have given the general silly premise of it.
But the subject matter too, that he took on this very dark. The mom is hiding someone who she saved from a concentration camp.
Mhm.
She's hiding a girl in the walls. And he's like, Jews can read your mind. I have to be. And it's just all this crazy stuff the propaganda has told him. And I think Rebel Wilson at one time is like, it's a great time
Oh yeah, I forgot she's
to
in
be
it.
a woman in Germany. I just had child 18, Heil Hitler.
Oh
You
my
know, it's
God.
just like, and you're pointing the fact that like certain people aren't welcome. But Taika Waititi is this screwball comedy writer that takes on some very serious themes, like even the theme of death and what we do with the shadows. And it's treated with some reverence. And even the old lady, like I think that touched me, like him and this old lady finally finding each other and him
It's-
biting her at the end of her life.
A lot of his writing has lots of themes of sincerity.
Yes.
Like as how I would put it, like
Yeah.
Jojo Rabbit, even Thor Ragnarok. When you look at that movie, because that movie really connected with me, because I was looking, it was such a really great example of the MCU figuring out how to fix itself.
Yes.
Because you had Thor Dark World, which was not a great Marvel movie.
Very, very
It was
epic. It was more
okay.
in the like Wagnerian saga.
Yeah, and it was like
was very serious.
serious, And then they're like, "What if we just go in the complete opposite direction and we give
For number
Taika a chance to
Yeah.
bring him in?" And I think that was a really smart move. And the sincerity extends in the writing between Loki and Thor. You have reconciliation in the story with them, and reconciliation with Thor becoming who he truly is meant to be, the leader of Asgard, with his father dying and having to fight another person that is also his family.
And actually having a revolution of freeing all these people that are
yeah,
Jeff Goldblum's
and
prisoners.
accepting who he. And it's just, I thought it was really beautiful. Like I won't spoil it, but the ending, like near the end, where he has the vision with his father, and he's talking to him. He's like, "No, it's okay, boy. That's just how it is." And it's like, "Oh, this is so
Well,
beautiful,
that
and it's
beat
so well
of
earned too."
the scene where Odin dies,
Yeah,
that both of his sons are there.
yeah,
And that we see even when we go into other thing, even
Mm.
Loki is kind of like, I'm
Yeah.
Odin's son.
and that even leads into
that's my dad.
Infinity War and how that all went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really
Um,
feel like they did a good job with
That was
Ragnarok.
Ragnarok was a great movie, not perfect
No.
by any means,
No.
but
Yeah.
rather great. Which made me really sad when
Love and Thunder was
Love and Thunder
Yeah.
came
Quite
out,
at the
because it
same
was just
caliber.
it had so many the potential to be a really great film.
Yeah,
And there were funny moments, like him
like-
holding the things apart with his legs. Thaddeus just lost it. He's like, ah! And he's holding the two things. I'm just like,
It's like It was.
Yeah.
It had the potential to be great, and they just kind of like, I don't know, something went wrong during the production of that movie.
COVID happened and everything got interrupted.
I think they were given an insane budget.
Yeah.
There wasn't much care put into the pre-work of the film. Like everything was done in post. I feel like in this film,
put in, and then COVID happened, and that kind of
could have
derailed
been
things.
it, but I remember reading stories of like, oh, the cast is all down in Australia in quarantine right now for 2 weeks, and they're gonna start filming.
Gosh, I couldn't imagine.
And it's like they have every star in the film. They have like you could tell they're putting so much money into this movie, and it's like, oh my god,
Yeah,
how
the
much
special
money are they
effects
putting?
are gorgeous.
And they're gorgeous. They're amazing.
And the
Christian
casting,
Bale is the
Christian
villain?
Bale was
This is awesome.
was
Christian-
epic as the villain.
And all of the recipe, most of the recipe that they pitched was like, it got me amped. It was exciting. It was like, this can't be right. This can't be bad. This is going to be only good because Ragnarok was so good, right?
Now, I did
You know?
think the story with Jane and letting things she
and
loved
that was
go,
that was cool.
that was very touching.
Yeah.
And like the whole point of this villain's mission is, I prayed to the gods. They let my child die. Why should I love the gods? I'm going to kill the gods. And like even Thor's like, what do you want? You could have whatever you want. And he goes, I choose love, which is the name of the girl.
Mhm.
And I thought that was a really nice message.
Yeah,
and Jane
and
died.
the whole thing with the kids, him giving the power to the kids was cool.
Yes.
I thought that was really neat. And that made me excited because that was more callbacks to like the sincerity thing we were
Yeah.
talking about in his writing.
But the
I feel
execution.
like the execution wasn't that great.
A lot of the
Agreed.
jokes were just too over the top.
Too much.
And they didn't
yeah.
they weren't really funny.
They
They were just kind of like,
there. They were there.
yeah, they were just
Yeah.
there, and there was way too many of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not like a.
And then you had Natalie Portman being "I am woman, hear me, Thor."
Yeah.
Yeah. And no, thank
This
you.
is very
Yeah.
true.
and I thought that would have been a cool like intricate thing, but then you have the whole Valkyrie stuff in there as well, which makes really just no
that
sense.
was so confusing.
very
Especially
It was
too,
a
the
mess.
Valkyrie was the weakest character in
Yeah.
Ragnarok. Like they should have cut the Valkyrie
Well,
out of Ragnarok.
Well, it was pitched as she was going to go. The whole like one of the main plot points of the film originally, when it was pitched,
Mhm.
was she's going to go find her queen because she's a lesbian. That was
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
one
yeah,
of the
yeah,
pitches.
yeah.
But we never see it in the movie. So it's
Well-
like, come on, what are you
well,
guys?
that's I mean
at
that's
least
the
dedicate. You
That's
know?
the thing is though the character from the beginning was designed for the actress to be able to play out all her, play out all her
Strong female characters.
Mm-hmm.
rainbow sort of persona that she has.
See, the Korg rock guy found a gay person
Well,
to be with.
also it's like
But she
but
didn't. It's
Tessa
like,
Thompson.
But it doesn't. But it
and-
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
She is that, but
Yeah.
the whole character was literally just designed for her to be like a quirky lesbian Valkyrie. So whether or not they executed that well enough, of itself is a moot point because the character wasn't designed
Uh-huh.
or written well to begin with.
Well, in Ragnarok, you care for her. I think.
I don't care for her.
Well,
I wish she was dead. I wish she died. Every point she was on screen, every single point I saw her on screen, I wish something bad would happen to her. I hated her. She was the worst character
in Ragnarok or in
Ragnarok.
Really?
Literally every
Yeah.
scene she was in, I
Yeah.
wish she would have died. I wish she would have died.
See, I think of her
That
more in
would
the
have been-
second one. I felt like they didn't execute her
Yeah,
well.
the
first
second
I
one,
felt
the
like she
first
was
one,
kind of a side
yeah, because you see the
character.
flashback when Loki
Yeah,
like starts fighting
that's
her.
the thing that
And I was
saved
like, well, you
Ragnarok
know
for
what?
me is
Yeah.
the fact that she was a side
A side
character.
character.
If she was
Yeah.
one of the main characters, I would have probably not gotten through that movie.
I think the
I would have
biggest.
broke the Blu-ray disc in half.
Man,
I hated her.
You're giving the audio. a
Hated
lot,
her.
You know,
audio
you
a lot of
guys were
work out on
talking
this one.
about Monkey Man a couple weeks ago,
Oh
or episodes
yeah,
ago,
yeah,
and you said there's this really weird scene where he's injured, and then he's in this temple
yeah.
with all the
And I didn't like
the
spoil
transition
it.
characters because they do
Yeah.
have that in the Indian culture. But
yeah.
it's made this huge.
But it's
part
made a
of the
big
movie.
part of it, and I feel like that's in there. Well, I'll let you finish.
No,
you go.
I feel like that's kind of what Disney has done with everything because that's the thing that is most popular and they're getting harassed about. It's like the Star Wars. We're going to have a strong female character. I'm like, no.
Don't bring it Star Wars.
Don't tell
please.
me that. Don't tell me she's a
David
strong
is
female.
already excited enough.
Show me. Just show me. And the problem is that's, I think, the issue with the writing. They don't show, they just tell you.
Well, I think that goes back to like because this is
It's
a
badly
symptom
written.
of bad writing in
Yes.
Hollywood and relying on, hey, I'm gonna put this in my script because this is gonna give me brownie points and it's gonna get
I'm
my script.
appeasing this
I'm
group.
appeasing it and I'm gonna get my
Yeah.
script greenlit because this kind of stuff gets scripts
that's
greenlit.
my
Exactly.
problem with the Valkyrie
Yeah.
character in and of itself is taking what is otherwise a fantastic movie
Yeah.
and trying to shoehorn something in that's poorly written and clearly doesn't work
Yeah.
just so you can
Also, in the pitch meeting, it's like
just
that
get
was
some
a
brownie
major,
points.
like that was a major aspect, and it seems like they were gonna go there, But because they have to sell in China, because they have to sell in
Yeah,
their
that's
territories,
half
they
their
don't
market.
accept that stuff like
Mhm.
that. It makes sense,
and
that
that's
they're-
the problem.
That's the problem.
That's the problem. The fact that that was a major selling point
yeah.
is
And then there's nothing to it at
is
all.
diversifying
Mm.
diversifying
diversity.
the cast. That was their selling point for the movie, not all the other great actors, not the great writing, not the humor, not the amazing special effects, not the interesting take on the story,
Yeah.
Well,
but
it's tokenism.
exactly.
That's why it's so funny in South Park. The one black character's name is Token, because you are our token character. We're going to throw you out
Dude,
there. But it's such a true criticism of what Hollywood does, that we're just going to give you these tokens of things to appease this group of people. It's not about making good art.
And it's not even about appeasing that group of people, because a lot of times
It doesn't.
a lot of times people who are in that group are not happy with the way these token characters are executed. It's more just to make these, mega rich Hollywood types feel just a little bit better about themselves.
About being white, I think, yes.
Well, I just find it, Monkey Man. Let's go back to Monkey Man really quick, and then we'll go to Dead Alive.
No, but I thought that was an interesting point you brought up a couple episodes ago.
Yeah, well, with Monkey Man, I was on board, and I still am on board with the movie. I generally thought it was a
fantastic
great
movie.
great
Yeah.
movie. It's free on Prime right now if you want to go watch it.
Yeah,
It's a great
yeah,
action
that's where I
movie.
saw it.
Dev Patel, right? That's his
Yeah,
kid.
Dave Patel.
He was in The Green Knight, which I loved.
Oh, that
and,
was a
and
beautiful film.
it's an acquired taste movie. But anyway, Monkey Man
Very arty.
is very arty, but it was good. But Monkey Man is like this John Wick style, set in India. It's grungy. It's really incredibly well directed and
works
choreographed.
well. The
And it
action scenes are
works.
insane.
It's great and awesome. And it's like, yeah, give me more of this. And it's really good.
There's just this off-tone thing in the middle.
It's just that, and it's not like I have anything against people who live that way or are struggling with that. It's just that I find that aspect of the script and the story and the way they get the character from point A to point B could have
Forced.
been, it was forced.
It
and
was
it feels
forced.
like it was in there because this is how you get your script greenlit in Hollywood.
yes, very
Because
true.
that's what, and if you look up stuff like, because a lot of people on YouTube hate Chris Stuckman right now, just because they think he's a bought and paid for reviewer, which he's not. He's a great fellow who's actually making.
What
a
did he
movie.
do,
Chris
Stuckman?
Stuckman's the movie reviewer on YouTube.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like
yeah,
him and
okay, I
Jeremy
know what you're
Johns
talking
used to
about.
collaborate,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Okay.
But Chris Stuckman brought this up because he had to write a script and had to produce a film. And he said, there's a lot of companies, and the big ones you go out there, they're looking for stuff to check mark a box so that they
Yep.
can sell it to the most people that
This
they
is
can.
how we market it.
Yeah, correct. But, and especially in the culture in Hollywood and everything like that. But you won't get greenlit unless you have certain, he alluded to it. He didn't say it outright, but he alluded to stuff like certain elements of social commentary or social relevancy in the script. And it's really unfortunate because that takes away and hinders creativity. But Hollywood's been doing that forever. So
Well, and I think at the root
know.
of that, the real issue is it's not that we want to make this art that might be watched 10 or 20 years down the road.
yeah.
It's all about money now.
Yeah, like
And I think the problem is when there's nothing wrong with money being a component, but when money is the thing that you're driving
yeah.
it's never going to satisfy you or your audience.
But
And I feel like I can watch What We Do in the Shadows and I
Yeah.
can laugh at it and it makes
Yeah.
my day better. Not because it's Shakespeare,
No.
but because it's funny and it's dry
Yeah.
and it's making fun of these real life things we all laugh about. Who doesn't want their roommate to do the dishes?
Exactly.
You know,
yeah. Or like, oh, hey, these are the bros that are the group, the nice fraternity. Or no, this is the
Werewolves,
club
not
scene. It's not
swearwolves, I
really a
told you.
great club scene, It's just
Yeah.
it's just a chill out place for nerds.
Yeah.
The budget for What We Do in the Shadows, by the way, was only 1.6
Yep.
million.
Yep.
And then it made 3 million in US and Canada, and then the worldwide was 7.4. That was pretty cool. They made all
for
their money
them.
back. So, and they probably only spent probably, I mean, not probably much on marketing at all. So,
Well, and I think, isn't it interesting, this teeny place
yeah.
where Lord of the Rings came out? Like, there's just some amazing art that's come out of there.
Mm.
And I feel like tailing on to that looking at the other film we did
I feel
may not be the same level caliber of art, but I still found it interesting.
That's a great word to use because we're going to dive in to Dead Alive.
Oh my!
So,
I have never seen this movie.
Speaking of media that lasts that
stands the test of time.
time.
Okay.
Let me tell you guys about Dead Alive. So we watched this last night, right after What We Do in the Shadows, which was a great bookend.
It was actually a nice pairing.
Released in 1992, directed by the famous Peter Jackson, written by him, Steven Sinclair, and Fran Walsh's wife.
Yep.
It was I don't know how to describe it. I would describe it as a love letter to Evil Dead. That's how I would describe it.
I also would say
in the
that
horror
it's
genre.
Probably someone getting into filmmaking, and it was his second film, you said, Dave?
It was his third
including the short
feature-length film.
Okay.
His third feature-length film. His first film was a short done way before.
Like when he was in school and whatnot.
But it was his third feature-length film.
Yeah. And so it's very early Peter Jackson,
Very
who has
early
a cameo
Peter Jackson.
as the mortuary assistant. And I did not even recognize him until Jake said, "Oh my gosh, Peter Jackson is in this," because he's famous for doing cameos in his movies.
I think it was David actually. David said, "Is
Was it
that
you?
Peter Jackson?"
Yeah.
I just happened to be looking at the Wikipedia article.
Nice.
Looking through the cast because Angela had said that
He's gotta be in here.
he always does cameos in his
He does.
films. So I was looking at the casting to see what character he played a cameo as,
Nice.
and it just so happened to be I was looking at it like right after the scene that he was in got finished. So I was like, hey, rewind it.
So we rewound it. And was Peter Jackson.
It was Peter Jackson.
Beardless Peter Jackson. He
Beardless
was
Peter
a baby.
Jackson. Very
was.
much so.
Well, and I think you said it was kind of a love letter to the Evil Dead, kind of because the horror tropes, the gore. I also felt that it was one of those movies that was a commentary on all those B movies that would come out in the 50s.
Kind of an homage
That most
to it,
of us
too.
watched on TV, or in our household, we watched Mystery Science Theater, make fun of them. And these movies had a second life because these Minnesotans are like throwing
These
stuff
Midwesterners.
they're like, and they said, we lied to the studio. We told them we can't move to New York. We can't move to LA. We have puppets, and we can't have ceilings that are a certain size because the puppets, and they believed them.
Oh
and,
my
and
god!
So basically, they were in Minnesota, and they said once a year, this team of like black SUVs would come out. They'd get out. They'd look around. Okay, it looks good. Then they get back in the SUVs and fly back. And they said having Midwestern humor made it a very different show, but it gave these horrible, unwatchable movies a second life. And it's funny, every time I try to watch.
And made them watchable sometimes,
Every time I try to watch one of the B movies they've made fun of, like even famous one like This Island Earth that was
or
in
Manos
E.T.
Hands of Fate.
Manos Hands of Fate.
God.
All I can hear are their voices in the background.
And Manos Hands of Fate, I could be wrong. I think it has a Criterion Collection
It does now because so many people saw. They said it was the best thing Mystery Science Theater did.
Yeah.
And people say, "Wow, you did that right off the cuff. You were just watching this movie." And they said, "We used to send one person in there, and it was TV's Frank.
TV's Frank.
And he'd be like, I just saw the gum on the shoe of humanity. And I can't watch it again." And then they'd have to watch it like 8 times to put the dialogue in.
Oh my god!
And sync it. And but it made those movies watchable. And even to this day, if I hear those voices, it calms me down. I would listen to Mystery Science Theater while I wrote my dissertation.
Which is crazy.
It was crazy. People have written concerts.
But awesome.
To the background of them doing, and it's nice to see them in riff tracks and thriving. But it is one of those things that I feel like having your niche, and I think New Zealand does have that, changes what comes out of it.
Yeah.
It's not as influenced by Hollywood. They're like, no, we may be greenlit for this, but we're doing it this way. And when you look at some of the stuff that's come out, it was well done. I don't know if I would put this movie in that category. However, I do remember, so this is an early Peter Jackson movie. And it's like very interesting to me because I do feel like it's kind of a love letter to all the really bad movies that came out of the 50s as well. That's kind of what I got out of it. But Jake, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah. Well, I want to
kind of
ask David to see
yeah.
what his general thoughts are on Dead Alive, and then we'll hop into the plot summary. So,
which Jake did.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts after watching it? This has been about 24 hours since we finished it.
Yeah, this movie was a shock to me.
Yes.
And I knew it was campy because I had been turned on to this movie. I hadn't actually watched it until now, but I had been turned on to this movie by a coworker who showed me a YouTube clip of a particular scene.
Yes.
And I thought it was the funniest thing in existence because of how campy and just cringy it was. And even with that in mind, and knowing that it was a, over-the-top, gory, ridiculous horror movie in the vein of Evil Dead, knowing that, I was still shocked by how over the top and how campy it was.
It was, where that phrase, we've used it a couple times today, over the top, comes from?
Where?
It comes from World War I, when they would make the soldiers go into the battlefield, even though they were going to get mowed down when they first went over. And the commanders in the British forces would take a gun out and say, anybody that doesn't go over, I'm going to shoot you. So the concept of over the top is it exceeds what's necessary, and it's a waste that no one needs to do. And I would definitely say this movie does fit into that category. It is over the top and it exceeds what's necessary. But I also think the attention to detail was fascinating because somebody had to set up these shots.
In fact, yeah, it's funny you bring that up because Richard Taylor, who worked with Jackson on multiple projects, including the Lord of the Rings films, and does all the armor for the orcs, all the practical stuff, the models, everything. And he mostly does makeup and costumes in the Lord of the Rings, but he was part of this, and you can tell like the early makeup is kind of not really similar to the orcs at all, but you can tell that this guy is really good at what he does, and it's gross and horrible, and it delivers exactly what it needs to, and it's actually far better quality than, say, the first Evil Dead, for example.
Yes, yeah, I would say
it's not like
about a decade between them.
Yeah, it's funny.
But it's distinctly New Zealand.
It's a low budget B movie, but it's not poorly done.
No.
It's done very well, and like the parts where it's awful and terrible and you can tell how fake it is, like you can also tell that it's done that way on purpose.
Yeah, well, and I feel like I will just have a disclaimer out there. This is not a good movie or a great movie by any sense. Don't go out and just watch it.
No.
If you can make it through half of it, I commend you.
Yes.
We made it through the entire thing last night because we are committed to excellence.
Yeah.
And I will just say that. Because if you look at the summary Jake wrote, that right there has my respect. Because I went home and I was thinking, how would you even summarize?
Well, this is not a summary per the word.
It's pretty dang good what you wrote. I will just say that. I will just say, compared to what watching this and the way I felt, Jake and I had just finished a TV series that was very good on Netflix.
We will talk about next week.
And we will talk about next week. Jake and I are going to do a podcast on that. It's a horror film called House on Haunted Hill. And it was so well done.
You spoiled it.
No, I'm
joking. Yeah, whatever.
But it's working on so many levels. When Jake was done with it for the first time, and I've taught it 4 times. So this is like the 7th time I've watched it through. And Jake was like, I don't have words because there's so much that went on. I feel that way about the Dead Alive. But in a, not a
totally
good way.
Different angle.
It's not Shakespeare.
No.
It's like Roger Corman scraped some gum off his shoe, threw it at Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson rolled it in some dirt.
With a little bit of Sam Raimi and Francis Ford Coppola.
Some Sam Raimi. And
why not?
Goes, I'm gonna make a love letter to B movies from the 1950s and Evil Dead. And by goodness, he did it. I'm just going to say that.
He did.
But I was just thinking, how would I even approach this? And Jake actually did a really good
We're going to go through the film because for the listeners out there, do I recommend this film? Only if you're a fan of Evil Dead because of how gross and nasty the gore is in this film. So if you can take Evil Dead, you can definitely take this, even though this is...
And some people cannot take Evil Dead.
So
know that going in.
Know that going in.
We watched it so you didn't have to.
Yeah, we watched it so you didn't have to.
There you go.
I would recommend if you're a fan of camp, if you think Army of Darkness is great, you're gonna freaking love this film.
Yeah,
If you
pretty
think,
much in the same
if
vein.
you think, there were some moments when you and me watched the remake of Evil Dead from 2013, the Fede
Mhm.
Alvarez film. Fantastic
Which is
movie,
amazing.
so good.
Yeah.
But there were some moments where I'm like,
I
I'm
can't even
sorry,
look at
I
this.
can't look away.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I can't watch this.
Mhm.
I was looking at the screen the entire time during this film, and I was like, I want to look away, but I can't.
It's so bad. It's so bad.
So let's dive into Dead Alive. Welcome to Dead Alive, ladies and gents. Dead Alive opens with what all masterpieces start with, an opening shot of the sky. Yes, Dead Alive joins the same club as Working Girl, The Dark Knight, and Heat. We start off with a shot in the sky, but this time it's from the ground. We got no budget to rent a helicopter now.
That's right.
Yes, our opening shot is of the sky, but it's from some butthole crack in a rock somewhere in New Zealand. We pan down from this view in the sedimentary cesspool, and as we do, we are greeted with the words, Skull Island, southwest of Sumatra, 1957.
Oh boy.
We proceed to see two funny-looking New Zealanders running down this crack, carrying a wooden-looking cage. One of the Kiwis drops his end of the cage, and the other ridicules him and says the phrase, listen, picked up the cage, get the big dollars. We are then greeted by a bunch of natives who assumedly weren't big fans of the man's misuse of contractions. And they corner the two men and demand that the rat monkey be left in the valley where it belongs. The no get the big dollars man then pulls out a packet of paper and shoves it in the native's face and yells permit multiple times. Natives look at the paper, think about it, and then rip it up. And the no
As
get
well
man,
they should.
and they rip it up. The no get man then pulls out a gun and says, I'm a New Zealand zoo official, and this monkey is going to Newtown. And the guy starts blasting. The natives, who don't get shot, just run off and hide. The no-get man cuts off the ties of the cage with a machete, then lifts it onto his shoulder and runs off, leaving the other man behind. The two men run through the White Mountains, which is, by the way, where they filmed Return to the King, because it's the same exact place where Aragorn and part of the Hobbit, where Legolas, Gimli, and Aragorn go into the mountains to the dead people. It's exact same place. In fact, there is a shot. I was rewatching this. There's a shot where they're running, and it's like from the view of this ravine, and they run by, and you only see a little of them for 1 second. It's the same place where he films same setup as Return of the King. So anyway, I lost my spot.
It's okay. I just along those lines, what I think is brilliant is even though this isn't a good movie by any shot, it's amazing.
Freaking entertaining.
Well, it's freaking entertaining, but I also think, look at what it did. It prepared Peter Jackson to shoot in all these locations.
That is true. Yes.
And I feel like even if this is a great movie, you could see like kind of there's stuff that you do, and God, even if it's bad, he sometimes uses it.
For good.
And for good. And I mean, I honestly think of Lord of the Rings as one of the best movies ever filmed. And I don't think that could have happened to someone who was inexperienced.
And if you know what? If we have Dead Alive to thank for the Lord or the Rings trilogy, then God bless it. Let me tell you. God bless you, Dead Alive. Okay. He gets to the car. The no-get man gets to the car. He hurls the cage in and himself in the Jeep, and his two cronies hop in, who, might I add, were playing baseball with rocks just moments before he jumped in the car.
I forgot about that.
So the natives are chasing the other guy. The other guy emerges out of the ravine, and they're driving away in the Jeep. The man trips while running on the rock, and trips over a rock while running, and the Jeep goes over a huge bump. And the cage falls on the man, and he gets a nasty dose of ketchup on his hand. The second man catches up with the Jeep, and the natives give up for some reason, even though they're going like 15 miles an hour. The no-get man then recalls, "A little bugger bit me." And the second man replies, "Zingaya!" The Jeep comes to a screeching halt. The second man then kicks no-get man out of the Jeep and hops off with the two other men following. The second man says, "You've got the bait." There's some deadly in the Jeep. The no-get man says. The second man turns around and looks toward the Jeep and grabs a large machete that looks like an axe. The two men hold the no-get man, and then the second man cuts off the guy's hand and then proceeds and screams in bad ADR and then cuts his arm off, and they proceed to yell Zingaya again and point to his forehead. They then yell Zingaya, and then the second man swings at no-get man, and boom, we get Dead Alive's title. Not Evil Dead.
Nice animated blood.
Yes. Very early 90s.
Very early.
So we proceed. So what do you guys think of the opening? Like opening the movie.
It set a tone.
Set a tone.
Like from the very beginning, it was like I was just seeing this. Okay, yeah, they're in a ravine, and then all of a sudden I see the little subtitles appear. Skull Island.
And
Like,
we started
what?
laughing.
Yeah, we're like, what?
yeah, it's just like, what is this movie? Like right from the very beginning.
What genre do I put it in?
Oh, man. We proceed from there and watch the rat monkey get from Skull Island to New Zealand with model airplanes and all. We go, yeah, there's lots of use of models and train in the trolleys and stuff, which is that's cool to
And
see.
every vintage car they could find in
Every
Wellington.
vintage car they could find.
And they used them all,
And
too.
they use them too. Let's see. We go from there to a delivery vehicle in front of a old small corner store where a very tall man walks out of the small vehicle. In the store, we find Paquita, the cashier who then greets the man entering. She is quite excited by the sight of this man and then proceeds to pull her off her overcoat and show off her dress underneath. The man first pays no mind, but then Paquita goes up to him and then he compliments her and then walks away. Paquita looks longingly at the man, and as we get up and as we get closer and closer to her, we cut to a shot. We get a good look at her Bruce Campbell-esque jawline. We then get a scary shot of an old hand grabbing Paquita's arm, and it's her mom? Well, it's some old lady. Ask Paquita if she likes that man. Time for tarot cards, baby.
Yeah,
We then get a scene of Paquita and this lady and a Mario-looking fella, I'm guessing it's her dad, all at a table, and she's showing off to Paquita her tarot cards. After it's revealed that Paquita will be romantically entangled with a man extremely soon, the old lady also reveals that a certain gypsy symbol that Paquita will see when this man is near. Well, it just so happens there's a man in the store right now. So Paquita, looking quite annoyed, gets up, goes to the man, attends to him, stomps her foot, gets his attention, and he walks over, he gives her a list, and then he's like, oh, and before I leave, I think I'll have one of these now. And it's like a licorice or something, I think.
It's like a candy they had. This is the 1950s.
Yeah, the 50s.
So you'd have like complimentary stuff for your customers. Everything was about service. And then they delivered the groceries to you.
Yeah, and so he's handing her the list. He's going to grab it. Oh, he's mumbling idiot. He spills the pencils and the licorice, and then she grabs his hands before he starts cleaning up, revealing the symbol made out of licorice and pencils.
What a plot point.
And then she is instantly entranced by this man and follows him out of the store. He just bumbles his way out and then almost gets run over by the trolley, grabs onto the trolley, and just goes home that way. So as Lionel gets near to the house, we hear his mother calling out his name, Lionel. Lionel runs to the home and finds his mother in the kitchen wielding a knife and declares there's a beetle under the fridge. She proceeds to blame Lionel and opens a letter with the knife. She informs Lionel that she has been accepted into the WLWL, Wellington Ladies Welfare League. She then declares, oh God, and says the house, which is spotless, by the way, is a total disaster and needs to be cleaned, and gives countless chores to Lionel, and looks out at the lawn, which is freshly mowed, that he just mowed today. And she says, does that look like a well-maintained frontage?
Yes, I know. She said in front.
Frontage.
Oh, frontage. That's right.
We cut to Lionel mowing the lawn, and when the mower stops working, as he crouches down to take a look, a dog comes out of nowhere and just jumps on him, that German Shepherd. Finding out soon that as the dog's licking him, it's Paquita's dog. She's brought him some groceries. Some dialogue exchange, and he says that her dog is almost big enough to be in a zoo. And because we're lost in translation, they agree to go to the zoo on a date the next day. Yes. We cut to Lionel's mother peering out from a window and drops some flowers and crushes them with her foot. We get an incredibly awkward exchange, guys. Let me tell you, between Lionel and Paquita, just gawking at each other. And then Lionel hears a crash in the house. He runs back inside, and the awkwardness comes to a halt. Lionel finds his mother with a broken vase, and she blames everything on him. And then she laments Lionel's father, who's dead.
She would make Norman Bates' mother look like a kind matriarch. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So we got to the zoo, the lions and monkeys and slobbering cannibals galore. We get Paquita and Lionel chatting and enjoying the zoo. They come across a pond, and Lionel has a moment. This is important, guys, where he flashes back to a traumatic moment earlier in his life. He then regales Paquita with a tale of how his dad died trying to save him from the drowning ocean. Paquita comforts him. All is soon forgotten when they see the monkey exhibit. Ooh, monkeys. Soon after, a monkey gets sucker punched by another one in a neighboring cage. Boom, it's the rat monkey. Yes, in all the stop motion glory, he THOs one of the monkeys and grabs his fruit, and then grabs the monkey and pulls the animal's arm through the cage hard enough where he pops the whole arm off the monkey and starts devouring it.
Yes.
Pandemonium ensues, and the monkey exhibit it goes crazy as the two lovebirds watch in horror. A zookeeper runs over and proclaims, "Poor little bugger!" He slaps the cage of the rat monkey to get him away, and then drags the body of the other monkey out. And then and this is really graphic, but we won't go into detail. He regales the couple with the origin story of the rat monkey, Rat Vikings. As he tells this incredibly disturbing story, he drips monkey blood on Paquita. And then he goes, so after that, she goes and sits down and is aghast. Out from the bushes, the mom grabs the bushes and she's spying on them. And then she's like, huh. And then she slips literally on a banana peel and falls back into the monkey cage. And the rat monkey grabs her arm. It's like, and just totally bites into her arm.
Yes,
and
really
she
bad.
lets out this most curdling, bloody scream I've ever heard in a movie, I would say. And then she slaps that monkey down, and then she like steps on it and kills the monkey.
She kills the rat
She
monkey.
kills the rat monkey. So she murders it, and the zookeeper goes up to her. He's like, it's like his prized exhibit that they just got. He's like, she's like, what are you doing? Look at my dress. Like she says her dress.
I
and all
am
this.
the victim.
I am
always.
the victim. What do you guys think of the zoo scene? Oh man.
I will say this. A lot
God.
of times in bad movies, they give us a clue to somebody's traumatic backstory and they never pay off.
Mm.
And if you give me a gun in the first or the second act, I want to see that gun used in the third act.
Yeah.
And I will be happy to say that Peter Jackson does pay that off
does
in
pay
a
that
very
off.
interesting way.
Very interesting.
With his
way.
trauma in the water and his dad drowning.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will say also that it's like this woman who is his mother is a total narcissist.
Yes.
She's just like everything
It's
is
like,
everybody
he is only
else's
mine
fault.
and no one else's.
That's right. She has an unhealthy codependent relationship with her child.
Really
and
disturbing.
it's disturbing.
Yeah. David, what do you think of the rat monkey?
Yeah, that was
God.
that was disturbing. Just the obvious like claymation weirdness of it, and
Looked amazing.
it was
did.
like I wouldn't say amazing is not what I would.
Well, I'm thinking
looks
Ray
okay.
Harryhouse.
It looks all right.
Looks like Ray Harryhouse.
Yeah, it does look like Harry Harris.
It's very obvious like it's very obvious when the rat monkey's in the scene and when it's not.
Yeah.
Just like the weird claymation, it totally sticks out. It's super bizarre. But it fits with just the general bizarre aesthetic of this movie.
It does.
And then the zookeeper is like telling of the origin of the rat monkey. And he's like,
It's
"These
so
giant
disturbing.
rats got out of the ship and went and they
It just
and they
graphically-
assaulted the monkeys
Yes, it
and then
graphically describes.
describes it. It's like, oh my God, what
It's
the
like,
heck?
first of all, how does that even
How does
happen?
that even work?
I know.
And then second of all, he says, and I think the natives use him for black magic, eh?
And why would you be telling
Why
this
would you be telling
to
them this?
random, patrons of the zoo?
The only thing I can think of is like him getting the blood from the monkey's arm on Paquita's shoe is foreshadowing of what's going to happen to our characters. They're going to be sucked into this violent world. I also feel like most movies, and this is my many, many years of watching Mystery Science Theater do B movies, is that the reason that something is wrong with this rat monkey is that something happened against nature. And because it went against nature, it's an abomination because God didn't create it. It's something evil.
Yeah,
you know what I
and-
mean?
And I have no issue with the story or the origin of
It's
it at
just
all.
the way they did
It's
it.
just weird.
It was very strange.
Yeah. Okay, so continuing on. After some commotion, we see Lionel walking his mother home and a nurse is bandaging up her bite. After a short conversation, we cut to nighttime where Lionel tucks his mother into bed and she's so grateful. She's like, I'm so lucky to have you. He heads back into his bedroom, and as he takes off his outer coat, he hears Paquita calling his name outside. And he then he's like, huh? And he goes into the window, oh girl. And he's like, whoa. And then he's like, huh? Mom's awake. And he's like, he runs to his door to see if mom's there. And he's like, whoa. He peers around the doorway. And of course she's asleep,
Well,
And
she
then
also got bit by that rat.
Yeah. And then he shuts the door and then just teenage jumps, rolls over his twin bed and goes up to the window. And after they have she climbs up to the window and the ladder like next to his room. And they have a tender conversation before going to Funky Town. The part where Lionel, we then intercut this. The whole like we don't get anything graphic or anything,
No, there's
but they
nothing graphic.
intercut this with the mom like moaning in her bed because of the horrible pain she's having at night, and she's like
From the bite mark.
and because of the bite, and then Paquita, and then it cuts into intercuts with Paquita's mom doing tarot cards, and it's like, oh, this is connecting, and it's gonna be bad. So what do you guys think of? What do you guys
that
think of
was
those?
a really creepy juxtaposition.
Very
which
weird.
I get, I get it. It's Peter Jackson. He's weird, but like Paquita moaning because she's making love to this making love to Lionel, juxtaposed with the mom moaning because she's like transforming.
And the wound takes on a life of its own.
Yeah,
kind
it
of.
like squirts out, and it's like, ooh.
Yeah, it's just it's an incredibly disturbing scene, but it also sets the move that they have brought their evil here.
Yeah. The next morning, Lionel brings his mother breakfast in bed. Ah, what a beautiful day. He just is feeling his best right
Life
now.
is so
Life
beautiful.
is so great. And then he turns and just in horror finds that she's suffering from a bite. He treats her wound as best he can, but to no avail. Then folks from the WLWL show up. They want to meet with Mom. So Lionel helps get Mom ready by helping her glue her skin back on that she accidentally
She has
tore
a
off.
rip. She has a rip.
She ripped her skin off while putting the makeup on, and well, he helps glue it back together. Nothing out of the ordinary there.
That's
And he's
right.
taking this very well.
Yes.
At the breakfast table, Lionel apparently made them breakfast. Mom can barely talk and she's shaking vigorously. The man from the WLWL slams on the table and declares, there needs to be another war and no pudding. And
I don't think he's part of the WLWL.
he's the husband.
Yeah,
of the
he's the
lady.
husband.
He's the
who's there, yeah.
husband of
For
the
a free
lady
wheel.
who is the president of the WLWL.
And he wants a free meal.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
just
Basically.
Yeah.
he's just there to eat.
Yeah. So Lionel brings them custard. And then because Mom is so sick and decrepit, she squirts out blood out of her wound, and it lands in his custard bowl. And he's like, oh, this is so heavenly. He takes another bite
It's so
with that nasty stuff in there. And he's like, damn fine custard.
Yeah.
Rich and creamy, just the way I like it.
Oh god.
If you thought cringiness was bad, you have never seen this movie.
Oh,
so let's
man.
just tell you.
Yeah. After breakfast, Paquita comes running into the house while Lightning is scrubbing off the blood Mom tracked onto the floor. She says she's in great danger as her dog runs up the stairs. They then hear a loud scream and barking and run upstairs. Mom has fur hanging from her mouth. Lionel jumps towards Mom and pulls the dog tail out of her mouth, which was so gross, extremely long and nasty. Paquita screams, she ate my dog! Mom, and then Lionel's like, not all of it. And then there's a complete decrepit pieces of the dog on the bed. It's like, what happened? What is this?
And how did she eat the whole dog?
How did she
so
eat the whole
quickly?
dog? Lionel then jumps. Let's see, where was I? Lionel. So Mom lunges at Lionel and pushes him out of the way while motioning toward Paquita. Lionel stops her and rolls her down the stairs with and all of her dummy self, as they not roll one but two sets of stairs. They end up calling the nurse because old Mom is dead. The nurse swings by and they evaluate Mom, and she quite is dead. Paquita heads upstairs to start packs Mom's things, which is such a nice thing to do after she eats
Because
your
they
dog.
don't know if she's dead until the nurse says, yeah, she's not breathing anymore.
Yeah, so they don't know.
Paquita thinks she's going to the hospital.
So she's going to the hospital.
Yeah.
And her dog just got eaten by the mom who's
And she's
dying.
still into him.
and she's still into him.
And it's like she's
this is
staying with
destiny.
him.
This is destiny, like foretelling to her, like, hey, this is your man. Like,
I
you-
also
give up
respect
on
her
her.
resolve for taking everything, even the death of her dog in stride.
yes, definitely. So, oh man, where was I? So, Paquita heads upstairs, packs her things. Such a wonderful, wonderful, touching thing. And then after a moment of Lionel mourning, his mom is back on her haunches and tears into the nurse's face, then snaps her head off. Mom tosses Lionel into the next room after killing the nurse. And as Lionel is sliding across the banister floor, his foot, as he enters the next room, moves and he turns on the radio.
Forgot about
And
that
then the
game.
nurse and so they're thrashing back and forth. He's trying to get her under control. She's choking him out. And Bikita's upstairs like, does she want the green toothbrush or the white one?
Yeah.
Green. And then the nurse wakes up. And then Lionel
Who's now a monster.
And her head's somewhat still attached. And then he ends up throwing both of them into the basement and then tells Bikita as she comes down the stairs, they're at the hospital. Mom with the nurse. She's like, oh, and then urges her to leave.
Yeah.
After this, guys, is the Nazi scientist scene. And
Forgot about that.
And Angie, I want you to explain what this scene was. Why did he go to her,
he goes
him?
to the Nazi scientist because he
And we don't know yet. Not right away.
Yeah.
But go on.
We have, as this scientist has a German accent, he's mostly bald. He looks incredibly Gaelic, as if he hailed from Middle Europe. And he's like, he asks for sedatives. The guy's like, I don't have any sedatives, but I have tranquilizers. And so he's like, so he gives him this big, fakey blue bottle of tranquilizer liquid. And as he does, you see a swastika on his arm. And he says some line to the effect of like, I forget, like something to the effect of like, we can't go back, or like, that's good stuff. I'm like, oh my God.
Wow.
And so Lionel takes this tranquilizer. For some reason, David brought this up when we were watching it. He said he just kind of goes with it in the second act. Like, he doesn't question, my mother is trying to eat me. The nurse who has been bitten by her is trying to eat me as well. I'm just going to give them tranquilizers in their nose. And then life will be okay. And I feel like it's one of those people that's so stuck in the situation. They've been told what to do so much. He can't even envision a life without the mother.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that's probably psychologically where his headspace are. Also, people getting bit by rat monkeys and then trying to eat you is pretty abnormal. But he takes it in stride.
Yeah. So he gets the tranquilizer from the scientist, and then he heads back to the house. And he injects both Mom and the nurse with it and puts them to sleep while in full armor,
so they don't bite him.
Yeah, so they don't bite him. And then we get another flashback of Lionel's vision of the water, and this time it's a woman dying in the water.
A blonde woman.
He's like, oh, okay, all right. So Lionel goes to Bikita and asks to see the tarot cards. The gypsy woman says he's marked. While we cut in between Mom and the nurse breaking out of the house. It's great. The mom bursts through the front
Kool-Aid
door.
Man style.
Kool-Aid Man style. And then
she just bursts out there.
The actress is running toward these two guys on the street. And these two guys don't even phase it. They're just walking straight into her. And they're like, oh, shoot. And she just pushes them away.
She's trying to get to her son.
And so the gypsy woman and Lionel have a staring contest right after this. And they look at each other for a very long time. And then the gypsy gives him the gypsy symbol of the what was it, the cross and the moon, or whatever it was called.
It's a emblem.
It's the symbol of white light or something like that.
Yeah. It's like a
she's giving it to him
to protect him. Yeah. And so we see Mom get hit by a trolley right afterward and flies through the front door of the store. Lionel then, just so happens, she lands right in front of him. He injects her with the tranquilizer, and he just happens to have it and falls asleep as everybody flies into the store to see what's the matter. So before we get in the funeral, what are your guys' thoughts on this movie so far?
I had no idea where it was going after this.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
This whole thing was just it was I was taken aback. This whole idea that he was just gonna
go with it.
Take care of his zombie mom and he was gonna push away this woman who he was in love with
because he doesn't want her hurt,
so he could take care of his zombie mom. That was mind-boggling to me.
It was also a really unhealthy. The Bible says you're supposed to leave and cleave when you get married, and I don't think that is in this man's vocabulary. I think he thought he would just be taking care of his mother forever. And even as a zombie,
So funeral arrangements are made, assumingly, and we cut to the funeral where for Mom, and the WLWL man husband is there, and he says, "Just saw last Friday, picture of health."
Yep.
We get introduced to the father and the coroner runs off forgetting something, and we're introduced to the Kiwi version of old Foghorn Leghorn himself.
Oh my God.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lionel's Uncle Les. He's one of the creepiest uncles with all the bad traits you can imagine, and tries to make a move on Bakita. After the creepy interaction, Bakita asks the father, "Where's Lionel?" and responds, "I don't know. And if he's not here in 10 minutes, his mother will be delivered into the hands of the Lord without him."
Yeah. Sorry, son.
So we then cut to like Lionel going full like Bruce Campbell. He's like, "Whoa." And then he's in this hallway and he's looking for his mom. So apparently this is like the building next door or something. I don't know. But he finds her in this room and she's hooked up to an embalming machine.
No, he finds her after that.
No. It's right before because right. Right as he's about to tranquilize her again, turns out that's where the coroner was heading. And so the coroner is running in there with his assistant, Peter Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
And she's hooked up to this. He tries to trank her. And then the coroner's like, "I'm going to make her pretty." And then boop, puts both of his fingers on the eyes and puts the eyes back into the sockets. And then we intercut between the father's speech and the mom. And they put her in a coffin, by the way. And then Lionel cracks her out. And then she wakes up. She's like, "Ah!" Yeah. So he's trying to trank her again. He's trying to trank her. He eventually does, but not before he bursts through as she tackles him through the glass in front of everybody. And
people think that she's dead.
People think she's dead.
Because he tranquilized her. And so they're like, he just can't let it go.
He just can't let it go.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think of this whole funeral scene? Uncle Lester's there.
Uncle
the
Les
WLW man is still alive somehow. What do y'all think of this?
Yeah, my favorite part of this scene was just the outlandish accent of the Father Magruder character.
The priest.
Yes.
Like his delivery of his lines was so intense.
So great.
So intense, and his accent was like, that is probably one of the strongest Kiwi accents I've ever heard in my life. Like there's no way that you could mistake that for any other accent.
Angie, what was your takeaway from this whole sequence?
I feel like it gets you closer into the mindset of him thinking that I have to maintain this even though she's not dead. And it really reminded me in a lot of the ways, not only just the campiness, but the bizarre dark themes really reminded me of like Little Shop of Horror and Rocky Horror, where like they kind of have to maintain the facade. And I think we should do kind of some editing in the next part. Just because we don't need to go into that much detail of what happens in the house.
So I'm going to hand it over actually to David to describe one of the best scenes in the film. The famous scene with the quote. David. Well, I'll wait for the quote. I'll let you do it. But go for it.
So yeah, this was the scene. This was the scene that turned me on to the movie in the beginning.
It's a great meme.
So basically, we have Lionel going to his mother's grave because she's been buried.
Yes.
And he's trying to dig her up, presumably so he can trank her again. So
he knows she's coming back.
So she'll be trapped under the earth or something, I'm assuming. But while he's trying to dig her up, some,
hooligans.
1950s style hooligans.
Yes.
Who are, up to no good in this graveyard in the middle of the night, happen to catch him, and they think he's some kind of weird freak, like a necrophiliac or something. So they proceed to, try to beat him up. And while the leader of the group goes to take a whiz on the mother's grave while all of his cronies are beating Lionel up.
He is surprised.
As he's doing this, well, the mother wakes up and her hand shoots out of the earth and grabs him by the kiwis, so to speak. That's from Winona's Big Brown Beaver, the Primus song.
Oh, the kiwis.
Grabs him by the kiwis and
proceeds to kill him.
Pulls him down and
he dies.
Pulls him down and kills him. And
then launches him out.
Yeah, like boosh, and his body goes flying, and she comes up out of the earth and like bites and devours all these
hooligans.
Yes, and they die, And then all of a sudden, they start rising from the dead and become zombies themselves. And Lionel is faced with an army of them. And then out of nowhere, I guess he was taking a leisurely stroll or something.
He does live there.
No, he runs out of the house and he's like,
"Oh
what in
yeah,
God's name is going on here?"
Oh, that's right. He lives there.
He lives there. Yeah.
So he runs out of the house. And he's like,
he's like, the devil is amongst us.
Yeah, that's right. He says the devil is amongst us,
and he jumps on top of a gravestone that they're cornering Lionel, and he jumps on. He's like, the devil is amongst us, and then he jumps down and starts beating them up.
Well, before that,
you go.
He jumps up. He says, "The devil is amongst us," and he jumps down. He's like, "This calls for divine intervention." And then he starts doing kung fu on the zombies, beating the crap out of them, and like really, really over the top.
Yes.
Like Chun-Li kicking these guys.
Like this was 1990s action.
Like this would put the the classic campy kung fu movies. This puts them to shame.
It does.
And so after a little bit of ass beating that he hands to these zombies, he turns and he looks off past the camera and he's like, "Oh, I kick ass for the Lord." And he continues.
And literally the best line in the whole movie. It's so great.
He's ripping their arms off, and it's like over the top, and he's just.
What did you do before this, Father McTavish? What did you do?
The sound effects. The camera, he like ducks down and like sweeps the leg of one zombie and knocks both of his legs off.
Yeah, like turns him into just a torso.
Yeah.
And then for whatever reason, this scene like takes a weird turn. Like he's kicking their butts, and then he just like the head of one of the zombies that he's dismembered flies up in the air and lands on his shoulder and bites him.
Yes, the dismembered head bites him and he gets infected.
Which distracts him, and he trips and impales himself on a finger.
He jumps toward the zombie and does a flying kick. Like
that's right.
The most strongest kick he's ever going to do in his life.
That's right.
And then he trips over the zombie in the air.
Yes, that's right. He trips over the zombie in the air and lands on a stone finger pointing up and is impaled.
Yes.
And then
and I'm going to say this. I'm going to kind of summarize this next part.
Well, yeah, but what do you got?
This scene was the best thing in the whole movie.
One of the
After this, there is nothing good.
Well, I would say
that's
scene,
part of the genre.
Yeah, and I would say this scene is like the most over the top. Well, you get the end. The end's pretty over the top, but it's one of the standouts of the film. We'll put it that way.
Yes, and that was like worth understanding the context just for this scene with the 90s roundhouse kicks. And you're just like, I don't know why this is in here.
Yeah.
It's like when you watch some of the really bad movies Riff Trax has done, like Samurai Cop and whatnot, where it's just like,
why is this in here?
Why is this part of the cultural zeitgeist of the moment? I don't know why.
So, Ange, you go ahead and let's do the next scene, but the next scene is just...
No. So
I want to know what you guys' thoughts on this scene. I'm
going to briefly summarize because we're almost at 2 hours now.
Okay.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is a whole convoluted amount of errors.
Yes.
Lionel ties everybody down and he's feeding them tranquilizers and food.
Yes.
Some very inappropriate things happen and a demon baby is born.
A demon baby
is born. That's all I'm going to say. And Jake, what did you think about this demon baby?
I thought that this whole comedy of errors that happens in this next scene with the uncle, with the feeding of the tranquilizer eggs, with all this nasty stuff is just, it's like, it's really good physical comedy, but like it's like not only extremely inappropriate, but it's like
unnecessary.
It's unnecessary, but it's like hilarious as well.
Yeah, it's very hard to watch this and take.
It's very hard to watch. Like what is?
But happening? I will say this. So what he ends up doing is the uncle comes over. This zombie baby he tries to take walking in a pram. They're walking around. The baby tries to escape and eat some other people. He's able to prevent it. And the baby has like this creepy Chucky giggle. And I don't know how else to say that, but he's trying to raise this child as if it's his.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
And before all that, Makita finally catches up with him, and he's hauling tranquilizer, and he's going to his Nazi scientist dealer for this tranquilizer, and he's bringing more to the house. And Shakita's like, I went to the door, you don't answer. What's happening?
I'm
And then
trying to keep you from being eaten.
Yeah, and so he turns her away. He doesn't know how to handle it. And then he regrets it. He goes back to her, and she's like, no, get away from me. And then just so happens the delivery guy pulls up again, and he's like, get away from her, you creep. Everybody's saying you turn a loose screw. And then the delivery guy like calls her away.
And they start dating, but all he does is talk about football.
Yes.
And rugby. And like they're just walking around and she's totally bored out of her mind. Meanwhile, he has moved all the zombies, including the zombie baby. He's tied them all up and put them in the basement. And who arrives but Foghorn Leghorn himself, their creepy uncle.
Uncle Les,
and the
man.
uncle thinks that he's like doing inappropriate things, but doesn't understand that these are zombies.
Yeah.
When the uncle eventually
Well,
does
you got all these
find
dead
out
people down here.
that they're zombies, he thinks that he has killed them. So he wants to blackmail him for the estate and the money. And after that, the most bizarre thing in the world happens, which is the uncle throws a party.
Yes, he no papers are signed.
No papers.
Only the word and the submissiveness of Lionel is what this guy's banking on, because he's been told to do stuff his entire life. So immediately Lionel goes back down to the basement, tries to subdue these zombies, accidentally steps on a rake. I'm not kidding. And then drops the tranquilizer.
And he can't do that.
And he can't put him down. He's like, oh God, what am I gonna do? He hears knocking at the door. He runs up and boom, a bunch of people show up.
And they are ready to party. They have booze. They have music. It's the 1950s. People are glad to be alive after World War II. They're like, let's just have a party. So Lionel, Paquita is still walking around with this jerk delivery man who is ignoring her and talking about football. She hears the party. She wants to go up and talk to Lionel. So she leaves. And the delivery
guy's like,
not too broke up
he's
about
like,
this.
Where'd she go? And then he just puts his hands in his pockets
and
walks away.
In true 1950s fashion.
Oh my goodness.
All right, David, do you have anything to add to this part?
Oh yeah, this just this whole after the Father Magruder scene, I was like, I don't know where it's gonna go from here.
Where is this gonna go?
But it was just like I could not have predicted how over the top and just campy this movie was gonna become by this point.
Yeah, so
it has nothing on Rocky Horror Picture, or I look at other movies of this genre where it's like a horror comedy, and like nothing can really compare to this because I did not know where they were going to go.
Yeah,
and so
yeah, Bakita finds him, kicks Lester in the nuts, and Lester's toupee falls off. She runs down to the basement and finds Lionel and finds the zombie. She finally knows what's going on. What the heck's going on?
And instead of being completely disgusted or freaked out, she's on his side.
Yeah, and so this
is the woman for you, Lionel.
Yeah, and
don't ignore her.
So she and Lionel put down Mom. They find poison in the basement, inject all the zombies, and they dig up holes and bury them.
Give them a peaceful rest.
And then they're walking out of the house. And at this point, I'm like, God, how long does this movie have left?
I know.
This movie's almost over, right? Like, this is like the end, right? No, this is an hour and 7 minutes into the film at this point.
We've got 30 more minutes
and
to
then
go,
the finale third act starts.
Is on steroids.
And so
you want to take this one, Jake?
So I'm going to take it. And so you find out that they didn't inject them with poison. They injected them with animal stimulant. And you're like, what? And so all the zombies burst out, Macho Man Randy Savage style. We get a dolly zoom of Lionel, which looks really cool. And they're all like, I'm ready to eat. Let's go. They all head upstairs.
Including the demon baby.
They all head upstairs and they just start chowing down. It's pandemonium, guts and body parts. They're eating everybody.
Everybody's getting bit, too.
Everybody's getting bit. Lionel finds Bakita and Les. Les is like completely destroyed. And he's like, no, I'm getting out of here. And he runs out of the house.
Women and children out of my way.
Out of my way.
That's kind of how he is.
And then like, I am like having trouble like remembering all of this, but Lester's outside fighting zombies.
They're
There's
all
they're
fighting
all fighting
zombies.
zombies. They're inside fighting zombies. There's a guy that was in the dumbwaiter, and he's only half of the man he once was. There's a bunch of zombies fighting through the wall. Lionel gets separated by
their property value goes down. Everything's getting
Yep.
destroyed.
Lionel tries to get out of there. He's upstairs at one point. Bakita's trying to help people downstairs. And
There are
just
creatures and intestines
and then
chasing
we
him.
get the scene, David, where Lionel's running in place. And it's the gag where the blood's on the floor. He can't move. He finally gets out of there, and he steps on the body parts.
Roger
to
Rabbit
escape.
style, yes.
So, David, what do you think of this as we go through this insanity?
The third act house.
Yeah,
scene.
when I watched this part, I was just like, I wasn't really even tracking what was going on.
No, it's so hard.
No,
I
there's
was just
so
like,
much.
I was just like kind of just sitting back in utter disbelief at what this movie had turned into.
Me too, David. Me too.
And I will say, I was in constant laughter through this entire movie. Like, I'm like, oh, that's so gross, but oh my God, I can't
We're
stop
supposed to
laughing.
laugh at it.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
And for some reason, Lester picks the teeth out of a zombie. And he's like, you got molars, eh? And I'm like, is he stealing it for his teeth? Like, and we never go back to
we
it.
never go back to
You know.
that.
I mean, the assumption is that he doesn't want the zombie to bite him.
Because that's how you
Oh,
get bit.
That makes sense.
But
Yeah.
it's also just a weird scene.
It's
I
very
think
weird.
it's like we did
He-
the ADR for the teeth pulling scene. We're gonna
keep
film
it
you know?
in there, you know? It's
You
not,
know,
it's
I
making the
guess
cut.
so. And I also want to point out at this point that Peter Jackson's wife does everything with him.
Yeah.
That means they had to methodically plan out this 30-minute bizarre fight scene with everyone in the party getting turned into a zombie and depreciating the value of this property
Like, just
by
tearing the
literally
house
just
apart.
ripping the house apart.
Yeah, they're bursting through wall
And
after
I'm like,
wall.
Peter Jackson, you had a woman that
Yeah.
helped you write this, that helped you film this,
Yep.
and I respect her for
Yep.
that.
You have your Paquita, Jackson.
He
have
has
your
her Paquita. So
Yeah.
there we go. That's what we were referring to at the beginning.
And
of
then
this.
after that, we have your scene, Angela, with while Paquita and her friend, who are the only
Rita.
last two people alive, are playing Call of Duty Zombies in the kitchen, boarding up the
And
windows.
she will not let the friend Rita be
Yeah.
she basically is like, no, I'm with you. Like Les leaves them, he runs away.
Yeah.
Paquita is not that person. She's the one that
Mm.
tries to save the person
Yeah.
that's still alive. And I think that's kind of a juxtaposition. Peter Jackson, being Catholic, always has like these moral tells.
Mm.
And all of his movies are like this. And I'm just like, that's an important point. Good job, Peter Jackson.
and then your
Oh,
part
yes.
with the zombie and the light.
Yes,
the
so
light
they
fixture.
have one of the coolest effects that I've seen in a movie
Really
from
cool.
1992. Basically, this one zombie has turned. This lady was in the kitchen. She turned. She's coming at Rita, and Paquita is trying to like keep the zombies out, but save Rita at the same time. And the zombie gets thrown back into a light bulb, which is in her head and keeps flashing.
Yeah.
And they built like a whole mannequin that they put this light bulb
And
in.
illuminated.
And it illuminated. And I was, when that happened, I
Really
was like,
cool.
that is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And I was not expecting, like, the level of caliber. Like, yes, it's gross. Yes, it's campy. But the attention to detail and the stuff he did with like a zombie movie, I've never really seen. I mean, think about it. By this time, 3 of the George Romero zombie movies had come out.
Yeah.
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 And one, the zombies are getting sentience,
Mm.
and they're trying to like go against the government and plan a rebellion. And yet they did stuff in this movie I never had thought of.
Yeah, I'm gonna look up real quick what year Army of Darkness came out, because that was in '92 as well.
Oh man.
So you had 2 films with wacky, crazy, gory camp,
Mm.
and man, it would have been a great time in the theaters. Let me tell you.
Yeah,
if
I
you
know,
went
I know.
to-
We were too
yeah.
young at the time. But I
Um,
was.
Let's really quickly talk about the baby, and the baby fighting with Paquita and the girl. It happens. The baby bites Rita. The baby they try to throw it in the food processor. Doesn't work. The baby's just too fast for him. And it's just
This demon baby is
this
the
demon
survivor.
baby is the survivor.
Yes, yes.
And it's just ridiculous. They actually let Lester back into the kitchen after he
Yeah, they don't leave him. He
goes to town. He takes care of himself.
takes care of himself with yard equipment, and he left them.
And a gnome.
And a gnome, garden gnome. And Travelocity would be horrified. But basically, Lester left them, and when he needs help, they don't do that. They open the door to him.
Yeah, which is like, don't do that. Just leave the man out there.
This man deserves to be bit. Okay,
Yes.
this is it. He's been a horrible person.
And speaking of horrible people, somehow Lionel's able to get into the attic to escape from a zombie. It's really cool. The zombie's guts comes out, and the guts like become inanimate,
Mhm.
and they start chasing after Lionel, which is pretty interesting.
I've never
Very
seen that.
silly and dumb, but very cool. And he finds in the attic he's
Oh,
trying to
that's
crawl
right.
away, and out drops the emblem that the lady gave him, and it spins and it points to
The
a
emblem
box,
of light.
emblem of life, and it points to a box in the attic, a chest. And somehow he's able to get open this chest, and he finds pictures of his dad with this blonde woman. And he's like,
That he
"What's
keeps seeing
going
in
on?"
water.
Yeah. And he's like, "What's going on here?" And then underneath all of those photos is a dead carcass, like a dead skeleton
With blonde hair.
with blonde hair on there. And then the guts come back and they grab him
Yeah.
and they go.
Basically, talk about skeletons in your attic. Literally.
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 Yeah. So let's see what happens after this.
So after this, they kind of join up downstairs through a bunch of very wacky gags.
Oh,
and
we
the
have to
house
talk
getting
about
ripped
Les going to town with the knives.
Oh, that's right.
You got so
He does.
Les grabs a bunch of knives and he's like, "Let me at them, ladies!" And he, after trying to kill them multiple times, he fails to kill the ladies. And then he just starts like, there's a shot where it's like just him and he's like, "Rah!" And he's swinging his arms back and forth with the knives.
And it's like sped up too.
And it's
He's like
sped
chop 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 chop. It's like sped up.
And then we get a shot in the kitchen where he's like, "Oh yeah," he's covered in blood. It's zooming out, and it's
Dear
just
Lord.
all the piles of bodies like in front of him, and he's smoking a cigarette. He's like, "Yeah, I've done a good job here."
And
then he-
what ends up happening to him is that right after that,
He goes to the basement. The baby, he's chasing the baby. He falls into the basement, and then what happens after that, Ange?
I'm trying to remember. I can't remember because so
He
much
falls
happens
into
in
the
these scenes.
well. He falls into the basement.
Yeah.
And you don't really see anything. You see this like monstrous hand
oh, that's
pick him up.
right.
and pick him up, and essentially all he says, "Oh my God, Vera," and that's the name of Lionel's mom.
Mother.
So you assume that this is the Lionel's mom zombie has evolved into some new creature, but you don't really see exactly what it is. You just see this giant monster, the shadow of this monstrous hand pick him up and
Straight out of the crypt keeper.
rip him.
It's really cool.
It's very interesting because it's a lot like a Rat King moment where if anybody's played Last of Us 2, you know what that is.
Yeah.
But basically rats, if they're left in a place where they're deprived of light and food, they will actually start kind of fusing their tails together.
Yeah.
And there will be one rat that's dominant. And that's
Ugh.
kind of what's happened to all these zombies that he shoved in the basement. They've become this huge mother rat like entity.
Yeah, sort of. I would equate it to the mom got exposed to the embalming machine, which had green goo in it and stuff. And then she was given this animal stimulant, which they thought was the poison. So that could be it.
So she could be
Because
evolving.
the
kind of thing.
hooligan, the nurse, the father all go out and kill everybody in the house, but the mother stays. So that's probably what I would do. But after this, we get the scene with the lawnmower.
Oh, dear Lord.
He fixes the lawnmower. He gets outside.
He's surrounded by zombies. Him
Les
and Paquita.
somehow doesn't kill them with his knives. And the ladies are like, "What are we going to do?" And Paquita's like grabbing Rita. She's hauling her everywhere.
Yeah, she won't leave her behind.
She won't leave her behind.
She's a good person.
She's a good person. And then Lionel comes in, gives a lovely look where he's like, "You think he's going to say, 'Let her go, biatch,' or something like that?"
Some like movie line.
But he says, I can't remember what he says, but he says a quote of something. And it's not as good as those movies. Like, you think he's going to say, like, "It's groovy," or something like that.
Yeah.
But then he gets the lawnmower, holds it in front of him, and he just
Evil Dead's that
Evil
mother.
Dead's all of the
Evil Dead's
zombies,
all of
chops
them.
them up, and it goes on forever.
Forever. You
This
think it's
scene,
like gonna end.
You're
and
like,
it
is
doesn't.
this going to end?
We're
and-
watching this going, is it gonna end? No, she's still
No.
going.
Yeah,
like-
it's like he's actually dismembering the zombies in real time.
Yeah.
And we get to see
There-
all of
there's
it.
no there's no cut in the sequence. It's just like, I mean, there's cuts, but like the entire sequence is there in real time
And you
for
wanna look
every
away.
single zombie getting dismembered
Yeah.
by this lawnmower.
Yeah. So in the next scene, Rita got bit, and she's starting to turn, and Paquita is doing everything she can to stop her from turning. And then who shows up? Holy crap! It's the thing from the thing. It's Foghorn Leghorn's head perched on a spine, walking toward her, and it's real mad and wacky. And Rita grabs it, swings it around, and kills it and crashes it on a counter.
Kills Uncle Les.
She kills Uncle Les,
remains.
thank God. And
He's
then
gone.
the baby kills Rita in a
That's
really
right.
disgusting way. And then the lady in the lamp who got shoved up into the ceiling
With the light in
with
her
the
head.
light in her head explodes, and now there's fire, and then Rita turns on the gas, and then everything starts bursting in
And I
flames.
will say, to Rita's credit, she rolls with this whole thing.
Yeah.
It does not overwhelm her. She doesn't go, oh, somebody save me. She saves herself.
And
And I
with-
really respect that about a lot of Peter Jackson's heroines. They save themselves.
I'm looking at the movie right now as we quote it, and oh my God, the mother is disgusting. She has burst out from the fourth floor, ladies and gentlemen, and
She's
she
a Freudian
is
nightmare.
She is a rat king, whatever you call it,
I would definitely say that.
and it's like,
He is mutated.
oh, Peter Jackson, why?
Why?
Just Richard Taylor, all you guys, and Fran Walsh. Why did you go with this? Why?
What? Because they had to
Why?
map this out and then film it.
And then film it, and it's this giant prosthetic creature that has
David brought up a good point. He said it has a long snout.
a long snout.
And we were like, why does it have a snout? And David, you said.
Yeah, it looks like the rat monkey.
Oh,
It looks
That
like a
evolved.
gigantic version of the rat monkey, and it's even claymation animated.
Mm.
Um
You can continue.
and but it's like, you know, in the form of Lionel's mother.
Mm.
And for what it's like evolved somehow too, because it can now talk.
It can now talk. And so, Angie, I'm going to hand it to you. Before I do, Bakita and Lionel are finally together.
You think
and
they're
they
safe.
think they're safe. And Lionel says, wait. She's like, what? I have to go get Mum or something.
No.
What does he say?
He says something to the effect like, it's not over, or we're not safe yet. And then he says, haven't seen Mum around.
Haven't
yet."
seen Mum around yet. And so then, Angie, what happens?
Okay,
The lady.
so to not get too graphic,
Yeah.
there's some Freudian imagery that happens. But basically, the creature of the mother comes out, and she won't let him go.
Yeah, and they climb up
and
to the roof.
They climb up to the roof, and it's kind of this face-off, and she kind of consumes him, and you think, oh,
Oh,
and
wait. It's revealed, though.
oh, I thought the reveal was after
the
the
reveal's
consummation.
before the
It's before.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
sweet. So he basically confronts the mother and
Hmm.
says, "Why didn't you tell me? And why didn't you tell me that you said that Dad left us,
Mm.
and Dad didn't leave us. He has a
No.
flashback, and all those little clues. The gun they gave us in the first act, we get to use it now. Him being afraid of the water, him seeing the blonde woman under the water, him finding the body in the attic,
Mm.
skeletons in the attic, literally." You find out that the dad fell in love with someone, and when the mom found out, she killed them both, and he watched them drown. That's
Mm.
why he has this fear of water.
Yeah.
So it's like him facing his fear is him also facing his fear of the mother and the very unhealthy control that this Norman Bates like mom has over him. And then she tries to keep him from leaving. I won't get too graphic with this, but it's like
Why?
she tries to wrap her like entrails around him and keep him, and she
He-
takes
So Foghorn Leghorn is literally the guy from Austin Powers that says, "Get in my
Oh,
belly."
yes, that's
and
what
that should have
happened.
been said by this mother creature that we see here.
and of course it's-
Essentially, the question that Nicodemus the Pharisee asked
how
Jesus.
can someone be born? Why?
And we get it here.
Yes.
like,
Yes,
yep.
David, that is an excellent way to say that. So
Peter Jackson recreates that in this movie and answers that very question.
Yep.
And I feel like it's that not only does he confront her with the truth that she's lied to him all these years, but also he has to leave. He has to leave. He has to get away from this person who's gaslit him and deceived him and whatnot. And so he eventually gets away, second rebirth. He gets away.
Second.
And
Yep.
how does she get destroyed? I will put that over to you boys.
All right. So he does a forced cesarean on his mother and gets out of there. And then she falls through the roof backward. And Lionel is born again.
And this house that was her shrine is destroyed.
Is destroyed.
Destroyed by fire, destroyed by zombies. But we don't know what happens to the baby.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. The mother falls into the burning house and is consumed, but we see
Before this, we see the baby crying in the kitchen after Foghorn Leghorn's dead because there's nobody else to have fun with.
And giggling.
And
He giggles
giggling.
too.
And we don't see the baby. And then after this, Bakita and Lionel thankfully are able to get out of there. They escape, and the firemen finally show up.
With vintage fire
With
carts,
vintage
by the way.
fire carts, with
Yes.
wooden ladders, all the
It was
rage.
a well done production. I'm not gonna
And
knock
then
anything on that.
We find Bakita and Lionel. Thank the Lord they're safe. He throws the emblem away, which he used to cesarean out of his mom. And then they kiss, they make out, and they walk away. And that's Dead Alive, ladies and gentlemen.
And that's Dead Alive. What are your
what's the interesting thing though is so we actually see the baby. We actually
In the
see the
house.
baby in the house after all the other zombies are dead. The mom has died.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh,
so
really?
the
Yeah.
baby is actually left over.
Yeah.
The baby
It
is
could
left
come
over.
back.
And for whatever reason, this movie did not get a sequel.
I wonder why, David.
So I guess we'll never know what happens to that baby.
Yeah, it's just sitting in the kitchen or it's right behind the flames crying. And that's all we see, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I also think like it's this. I think like that house was like I'm so interested in stuff on the outside, and that it has to be destroyed because it's a lie. Everything is a lie, and like just as sometimes fire, people don't understand that in the Bible when it says like God's a fire. Sometimes things do need to be purified. And I kind of took that away from this movie. There's a lot to take away from this movie.
Yeah.
But I was trying to be like, okay, as an educator, if I had to analyze this, what would I say? And I feel like it really is both movies that we looked at are about coming of age,
Yeah.
are about growing up. And I think the vampires do it less effectively and Lionel does it more effectively. You know, that the vampires are kind of in What We Do in the Shadows are still the same people at the end. They still need to finish adulting. And that Lionel kind of does. And I like go with Paquita. She just rolls with it. That's your ride or die woman, man. It's like
Yeah.
she stayed with him through all of it. And she rolled with the punches and she didn't compromise her character. Whereas everybody is making these like, save yourselves. You know, she doesn't. And she goes back to help him. And stuff. I haven't seen Mom yet. You know,
I haven't seen Mom yet.
Yeah, I think it's like, and she is willing to walk with him down the street.
And I just wanted to shout out really quickly the cinematography, the camera work. It's all very like Evil Dead-esque in a lot of
Yes,
ways,
the ratio.
but it's very it's very like tasteful and very. At first, you're like, this is really messy because
is
it's all
bizarre.
like weird shots and things like that. But it's, I think, tastefully done. And I really like it because it gives you Evil Dead vibes. But
Yeah.
what do you think, David? What do you think of the production and all
Yeah,
that
I
good
think
stuff?
this movie is remarkable in that it's so
It is very.
so
it is very remarkable.
it's so over the top,
Oh God, yes.
so like terribly cringy and just campy
Yeah.
and ridiculous in every single way, and yet it's not a mistake. It's all done
It's
very
intentional.
intentionally because if you actually look at the production, everything
Had to be mapped out.
everything is super well done.
Had to be storyboarded. Had to go in with all the effects for all these crazy scenes. And I think that was where it's like, you know what, Fran Walsh and Peter Jackson, you have my respect. You know, it's interesting when they asked Sean Astin why he wanted to be in Lord of the Rings. He said, well, it's because of my father. One of my favorite Peter Jackson movies, which is pretty much as campy, is called The Frighteners from 2006. Because he did Heavenly Creatures, which is the one that put him on the map with Kate Winslet. And then he did about the murder in New Zealand. And then he did Frighteners. And Frighteners is about Michael J. Fox, who, after going through a traumatic experience and losing his wife, he can see ghosts. And Sean Astin's father, John Astin, who was the original Gomez in the Addams Family,
That's right.
went down to play this old cowboy ghost that is like stuck. And so Michael Jackson lives with all these ghosts. and they all died at different times. And they all died in different ways. And all of a sudden it's a murder mystery and all these things. And when John Astin came back, he told his son, he goes, if you ever have a chance to work with Fran Walsh and Peter Jackson, you do it.
Interesting.
He said, I've never worked with a husband and wife team that are so loving, so supportive. They never lose their cool.
Aw.
They are on track. They're a team working together and they make it happen.
Yeah.
And he said, if you ever get a chance to work with the two of them, do it.
Huh.
And that was why Sean Astin went to New Zealand to do it.
Interesting.
And I think it's interesting. We watch these campy movies like, this is the guy that gave us Lord of the Rings. But I think it's like you have to hone your craft.
Yeah.
And I feel like this movie, if you could storyboard the bizarreness of this movie, you can do Tolkien. Because frankly, this is some complicated stuff.
Yeah.
And we watched it so you didn't have to.
Yeah.
But I will definitely say I respect the art form. And even sometimes, even though like Evil Dead may not be your art form, it doesn't mean it's not somebody's.
Yeah.
Or it's somebody honing their craft. And I really think like all of these movies that led up to Lord of the Rings were Peter Jackson and his wife doing this litmus test to create this art until it was this art that's going to survive for a century. It's the adaptation of a dream.
And I would probably say that the reason why a lot of this stuff that like, I personally like it or I connect with is probably because there's a lot of things you can appreciate in it, like the camera work and stuff like that. But also you see the kind of like, especially in the first Evil Dead, David, like the hunger of Sam Raimi and the whole crew and them like the want to get this film made.
Yes.
And
That this is our vision.
that this is their vision. And not only that, but like they went through hell and high water to get it finished. And I would imagine this would be a similar case. And it's cool that this film, it's definitely homaging a lot of the old B movies.
Yeah.
But
from
definitely
the 50s.
homaging, like, you could definitely see a lot of the inspirations on the sleeve of this film. I mean, you got Evil Dead for sure, but also it's just horror and comedy together, which kind of just never really always works, but
As
they
a
make it
genre.
work as a genre, but they make it work. And
Kinda
it's
like
also
outer space western.
slapstick,
Doesn't always
like
work.
him getting slid into the next room and the radio turns on.
Yeah.
And it just so happens to be a radio show about a mother talking to her son. And it's like, what? What is this? Why is this happening? It's so ridiculous.
But those little details add like nuance to it.
And those kind of things tell me and communicate to me that this was well thought out and they wanted this. They had a plan.
The pacing and the tone.
The pacing's great in this.
The pacing's great. The tone of it is bizarre.
Very weird.
But there's no weird shifts where it's like, oh, that doesn't make sense. Everything pretty much makes sense. It's just a really weird story.
Super weird.
Yeah, it's like the things that happen in the movie are utterly bizarre and beyond the pale, but within the context of everything that's happening, they still make sense.
Yeah, it's not jarring. Like, sometimes you'll be watching Rocky Horror Picture and it's like, why are there aliens now? Okay, fine. But like with this, that doesn't happen. You understand every step of the plot, which means there was time, there was work, there was planning, there was storyboarding, there were special effects that were done for every scene.
Yeah.
This movie, now that I think about it, this might have been one of the first movies that was so bad it's good on purpose.
On purpose.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And I see like it's not for everybody, but I look at it and I'm like, wow, that's so cool that you started in this place and then you did Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Peter Jackson.
They started pre-production in what, 97?
97, and it was a year after he did The Frighteners.
Yeah.
And Frighteners is his ghost story, so they did a lot of stuff with ghosts in the graphic. So when you see all the ghosts in Lord of the Rings, that was his litmus test for that.
Yeah.
And I really think, like, just because you love something that they did and you watch something they did, because I went away from this going, Jake, I don't know what to think. I'm overwhelmed.
I had the same thing. I'm like, what? Huh? I was just blown away by this movie.
And not in a good way.
Not well.
In a good way, like in
I was
some
like,
ways.
Oh my!
But I would
goodness.
not recommend it.
No, it's very,
it's very graphic.
extremely hard to
I
recommend.
wouldn't recommend it to a general audience, but if you're someone who can stomach the gore and is interested in films as an art form,
Yes.
Or you have your jam is Evil Dead. If your jam is Evil Dead,
Yeah,
you will like
I
this
hear
movie.
films that say it's the goriest film you've ever seen, and it's like Saw 4. Sure, why not?
Yeah.
But this is probably one of those movies I would label as a gore fest because it really
Yes.
is. But it has the horror and the comedy along with it. Like
Yeah, it has
this
the
over-the-top
campiness.
cartoon villain in Lester. Why is he here? Because he's an over-the-top cartoon villain
Yep.
named Lester.
Yes, and he's gonna kill everybody with shears. So,
So,
yeah.
Ganji, give me your final thoughts on Dead Alive.
Dead Alive. My final thoughts are, it's an interesting genre to explore, but you can kind of see Peter Jackson bending those genre lines by like, is it comedy, is it horror, and yet
Very hokey.
it's very hokey, it's very over the top, it's unnecessary, a lot of it, but at the same time, you can see someone who did a good job.
Yeah.
And I feel like when I was over this, I was just like, I don't know what to say. It's a lot to take in.
And the fact that like the scenes we didn't describe that was just a bunch of
Oh,
graphic
it was
comedy
just
of
too
errors.
much. It was just too much.
The fact that that man has that sense of humor and thinks that's funny is somebody who obviously to me seems very intelligent and knows what
Yes.
he's doing.
Yeah, well, and
But
I also
it's
feel
just weird.
if I
They're
had to
just weird
describe
as well.
this, like someone's like, mash it up. What 2 movies would you compare it to? Evil Dead meets Roger Rabbit.
Yes.
That's how
There you go.
I would scare it. The way
It's got
the
stop motion and
cartoonish-
everything.
It's got stop motion and everything, and I just feel like, and even the animation in the beginning,
Yeah.
I'm just like, you know what? He was playing with stuff, and Roger Rabbit came out 2 years before this in '90.
Yeah.
So I feel like, you know what? The '90s were such an amazing time where people experimented with music.
Yeah, you got
They started
Tarantino's stuff.
layering things
Yeah.
with music, and
Yeah.
I feel like art was another extension of that.
Yeah.
And I feel like every
Well, even Reservoir Dogs and all the
every
and Pulp
decade has like
Fiction,
something
Tarantino stuff.
where like creativity is working, and
Yeah.
just because it's not your creativity doesn't mean it's bad. Doesn't mean that everybody needs to watch it.
Yeah.
But I feel like I just see things that Peter Jackson did in this, and I'm like, all of this was preparing you for what you would later do.
Yeah.
And
I remember watching After Hours by Martin Scorsese, which I wouldn't recommend
Oh.
a whole lot to a whole
Yeah.
lot of people.
it's not a general audience.
It's not a
film.
general audience
Yeah.
film, but it was funny because it's like the plot kind of connected with, and it's like something that I was able to understand.
Mm.
But it's in '85, and a lot of and some film folks say that the '80s was. Yeah, there's a lot of famous movies that came out of there, but lots of them weren't as good as later decades or decades
But
before.
people were homing their
But people
craft.
were honing their craft, and
Yeah.
Scorsese was in this moment. Yeah, you had Taxi Driver, but this follow-up 2 films later was, I would argue, just as interesting and just as weird.
Yeah.
And you
And
see
Taxi
little.
Driver's a hard movie.
It's
to
a hard
watch.
movie to watch, but you watch After Hours, which is far more watchable,
Yeah.
and it's very well crafted. And if you like film, you're gonna like After Hours.
Well, I
so.
feel like someone took time to make
and it
that.
took time.
And they didn't let everything fall apart. I'm running out of time. What are we going to do with the third act?
Yeah.
The third act is well crafted, bizarre.
Yeah,
But
and I
well-crafted.
and I think part of the charm of The Dead Alive for me at least was, which also the original title was Brain Dead, in the original title.
Interesting.
Yeah, but holy crap! Like I think just not the not knowing what to expect from this film was crazy. And if you're
Mhm.
never gonna watch this film, I'm glad you got through and listened to us just spoil the whole thing for you.
You suffered through it with us. Thank you.
So David, give me your final thoughts on Dead Alive.
Yes.
My final thoughts on Dead Alive. I would say it lives up to the expectations I had of it when I first saw that
Interesting.
Father Magruder scene.
Which is
It did not
yeah.
it did not disappoint, but at the same time it was more than I expected.
Mm.
It was
And he
more
kept going.
yeah,
And it kept going.
where I thought it would have topped out
Yeah.
and been like, okay, time to scale things back. It kept going.
It was like, now
Yeah.
let's put them on steroids.
And I know the write-up I had was extremely long, but
You did a
that's
good
only
job.
the first hour of the film. There's still 35 minutes left after that whole write-up.
Well, and I also think you have to
That's so
process
crazy.
things like that after you see them.
Yeah.
And you did a really good job in your notes. Like, that was a lot, Jake.
guess,
It was a
yeah.
lot to go through. But
It
you have to
was.
process it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
It was funny. I was at work, and in my free time, I would have it on my phone, out of sight from everybody, and write on the computer. And it got to the point where I'm like, okay, I can't have my phone out at an angle because some people might see this. So I'm going to press the menu button
Oh
on my
my
phone
gosh,
and do the
Jake.
picture-in-picture thing. And so I'm like, I can still see it, but nobody else can.
see
So
it.
this is perfect.
Okay.
This is
good,
something you should
clever.
not be watching at work.
So then I have a question. If you see the I kick ass for the Lord scene again,
Yeah.
what are you going to think of? Because I have a very different perspective of that scene after seeing the whole context of this movie.
Why? Because of the backstory of the father, or
No, just because that was such a small part.
Oh yes.
Like David was saying, it's like you think, oh, he's going to stop, he's going to scale things down, and he doesn't. He kicks them into high octane
He
gear.
just puts it in the next gear and goes.
And I feel like I kind of feel that way, David, that it's like now when I see that, it's a great scene. I still like it, and it's hilariously and campy. But at the same time, I'm like, Lord in heaven, Peter Jackson, you took me to places I did not know you were
Yeah.
going.
I still think that scene is a standout.
Yeah.
Just because of the Father Magruder's delivery of his lines and the bizarre like kung fu action that just like appears out of nowhere. And the comedic timing of everything that happens is just so perfect.
It is. It's well done.
Can you imagine being a Warner Brothers executive, watching this movie and seeing the I kick ass for the Lord, and you're like, yeah, this guy can do Helm's Deep.
This
Oh yeah.
guy can do Helm's Deep. Gollum? Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
He can do
Uh-huh.
Gollum.
Oh, well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, we bid you adieu, and thank you so much for taking your time to listen to this episode of the Snarp Fangle podcast. And thank you, Angie, for spending your time and taking your time to come here and analyze these films.
Thank you, Jake and David, for making this a very memorable experience.
Very.
I never would have thought of juxtapositioning these two films, but it actually was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was.
And I'm so glad we did 2 spooky films from New Zealand directors. It's very, very fitting. So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you later. Again, for thoughts, concerns, or ideas, send them to snarpfanglepod@gmail.com. And we'll see you on the next one. And Snarp Fangle on.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.